Okay, so it's me and oh yeah.
It's like right back, but yes. Thank you.
This is not the place that
So you'll come up here. Have you worked this system before? No. Okay, super straightforward.
Somehow said
And there are some. Do you guys have any questions about the system or good? No, I think we're just gonna go with, did you do it differently in your round or?
I'm gonna have with her first.
Okay, sweet. We can just do it on the computer. This is if there's a tech issue and we can't resolve it in time, then just rely on this one. All makes sense. Yes. Not.
Thank you.
Awesome.
So whenever you're ready.
All right. Court will come to order and call the case of Justice Carbo, Shooting Star Gun Club LLC, case number 23-00203. The court will first hear argument and decide the plaintiff's pending motion in limine regarding the claim under the Responsible Firearms Sales Practices Act. Will counsel for Justice Carbo please stand and make your appearance?
My name is Ayush Yogesh on behalf of the plaintiff.
My name is Sahana Shriram on behalf of the plaintiff. My name is Joanna Bachman on behalf of the plaintiff.
My name is Gilbert. On behalf of the plaintiff.
Thank you, counsel. Counsel for Shooting Star Gun Club, please make your appearance.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Eli Schusler, and I will be representing the defendant, Shooting Star Gun Club, in today's case. May my co-counsel introduce themselves?
Okay.
Avery Asmus for the defense. Elizabeth Myers for the defense. Naomi Opens for the defense.
Thank you, counsel. The court will briefly remind the parties of procedure for the argument. Both parties are going to have a total of 8 minutes in order to present their argument, with the possibility for up to an additional 2 minutes of courtesy time, depending on whether or not we need it. Counsel is going to have 45 seconds in order to present their argument without interruption, and then the court may ask questions. Counsel for Cargo will argue first as the moving party, and just so we know, the jury is constructively absent for this part, so please direct your testimony towards the judge. All right, timekeepers, are we ready to proceed? All right, so when the first 45 seconds expires, both of you please stay quietly and display your time card, so both parties know how many time is left. I will grant courtesy time up to 2 minutes for each side. Counsel for Carbo, you may reserve up to 3 minutes of your time for rebuttal. How much time, if any, do you wish to reserve?
Your Honor, the plaintiff would like to reserve 1 minute and 30 seconds for rebuttal, Your Honor.
That's all right. That's down. All right, timekeepers, please notify the court after 6.5 minutes, leaving 1.5 minutes left for rebuttal. Okay. Counsel for Carbo, you may proceed.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Ayush Yogesh on behalf of the plaintiff, Justice Carbo. May it please the court. The issue before the court is whether Section 2007 of the Imperial Civil Code, which creates civil liability with regard to entrustment or sale of a firearm to an individual the seller knows is unfit, violates the Second Amendment. It does not. Today, we ask that you grant Justice Carbo's motion in limine for a pretrial ruling that the causes of action brought under the RFSPA comport with the Second Amendment, and that Exhibits 16, 17, and 18 be made available for use at trial. Now, the RFSPA comports with the Second Amendment for two reasons. First, the Second Amendment does not apply in this case. And second, even if it does, it follows the nation's historical understanding of firearm regulations. Now, for the first reason, the undisputed facts in this case make it clear that the RFSPA does not trigger the protections of the Second Amendment. Now, because of the defendant's as-applied challenge, we must look to how the Second Amendment is applied to Shooting Star in this case. Now, in Columbia v. Heller, the court found that the operative clause of the Second Amendment, which mentions the right of the people, specifically refers to individual rights, not collective rights. Shooting Star is a commercial enterprise that sells guns and serves as a restaurant, and thus its right, its collective right, is not one that is protected by the Second Amendment.
Yes, but under DC v. Heller, aren't these specific individuals in question in regards to the state statute about whether or not we're able to carry? Doesn't that apply to individuals, not necessarily corporations?
Well, specifically, the individual rights under the RFSPA are not being affected by the Second Amendment. Specifically, the RFSPA is not a licensing law and does not affect a person's lawful right to a gun. The RFSPA does not ban the possession of a firearm, but merely places conditions from which it can be sold. A person's lawful right to a gun is not infringed by this law, as they are still allowed to obtain a firearm through other means. Now, the protections of the Second Amendment refer to the right to bear or keep a firearm. Although it is inherent that the amendment encompasses the right to sell a firearm, it does so with a condition, that it is a right that may be modulated through conditions and regulations. Thus, to apply reasonable restrictions on those recklessly selling guns is not an encroachment of the Second Amendment's plain text.
Now, with the court's decision in Bruin, is that reasonable restrictions law still in place, or is it that administrative way?
Well, it is a reasonable law, and I'll point to in a second how it is analogous to one. Now, for the second reason, the RFSPA comports with the nation's historical understanding of regulations on firearms. Now, before I talk about this, I want to clarify the criteria of the RFSPA. Specifically, the RFSPA looks at 9 components when determining whether or not a user is fit to use a firearm. Now, 7 of those 9 components are strictly objective. Based on a background check, a seller is looking to whether or not the user has any glaring medical issues, whether or not they have a previous terrorist affiliation.
Is that something that's objective?
Yes, specifically, it's a fact check basis. If through a background check, a seller finds that a person has previously been affiliated, say, for example, with a terrorist group, then they would fail that specific component of the RFSPA. Now, the two specific semi-objective criteria of the RFSPA, being the maturity, the character of the gun user, are also constitutional. The court in Bruin held that a Connecticut law which analyzed the suitability of the gun user to the temperament was constitutional. Specifically, the analysis of temperament is a constitutional criteria that gun laws can employ. Thus, the examination of temperament and the RFSPA's examination of good moral character are almost identical.
And why exactly is temperament and good moral character specifically involved in this? Because Bruin sets out that they need to have a strong, parallel between what's in our history of law and what's in the statute. Temperament and good moral character means very different things in this situation. So how are those?
Well, specifically, it gives the retailer some kind of objective criteria to base their discretion on.
Is good moral character objective?
Well, specifically, the RFSPA is in context of safe gun usage. So looking at whether or not someone's character would promote them to use a gun safely. So it's specifically in the context of gun usage.
But is that language specific characteristics that would lead to safe or unsafe gun usage based on moral character? Is that set out in the statute, or is it just the broad good moral character?
Yes, specifically, the RFSPA says whether or not someone is reasonably suitable or sufficiently qualified to handle, possess, or use a firearm under the circumstances. And one of the circumstances is a good moral character. So it's in
No, that wasn't quite what I was asking, counsel. Is the example of good moral character, whether that is good moral character that would mean you are good to have a firearm or bad to have a firearm, are those specific characteristics laid out within the statute?
No, but the criteria itself is objective for looking at whether or not they'd be safe to use a firearm themselves. Now, I would like to remind the court that as stated in Heller, the Second Amendment is not a right to bear any weapon in any manner and for whatever purpose. Thus, qualifying the limitation of the right to bear a firearm is not a violation of the Second Amendment. For these reasons, the plaintiff asks that you accept this motion to eliminate and allow Exhibit 16, 17, and 18 to be made available for use trial.
Thank you, counsel. How much time would you like to allow? Oh, sorry. You may begin when ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court, my name is Elizabeth Myers, and I represent the defendant Shooting Star Gun Club. Today, the court should deny the plaintiff's motion and sustain Shooting Star's constitutional objections to the Responsible Firearms Sales and Practices Act for 2 reasons. First, the Second Amendment does apply to the selling and training on the use of guns for self-defense. And second, this act is not consistent with the nation's historical regulation on firearms. Moving back to my first point, the Second Amendment does apply to the selling and training on the use of guns. If we think about how people obtain firearms, there are a multitude of ways that people can. People can inherit firearms, people can be gifted firearms, but most of the time, people buy firearms. The commercial sale of firearms is how people exercise their Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. And so because of this, when we implement restrictions on the commercial sale of firearms, we are infringing on the Second Amendment rights, although some of this does have historical precedent, which I'll talk about later. Because of this, it's important to keep in mind that the Second Amendment is completely applicable to this act. And now I'd like to talk about the actual scope of the Second Amendment. In the District of Columbia v. Heller, it talked about the scope of the Second Amendment, and it defined it as an individual right. It also stated that it's broader than the plain text of the Second Amendment. Now, because it has been understood as an individual right, when we are infringing on, and as the plaintiff said, the business to sell firearms, we are actively infringing on the individual right to have firearms, because that is how people obtain firearms.
Now, I'll ask the same question I asked the plaintiff. When this law is being applied to a business, is it being applied to the business sort of writ large, or to the individuals that are purchasing from that business or being employed in that business?
Your Honor, when this act is being applied to a business, it is being applied, when it is being applied to the business as a whole, it is infringing on the individual rights of the people, because it is individually blocking them or restricting them from exercising their Second Amendment rights. Moving back to the actual Second Amendment, in its plain text, it states that every American citizen has the right to keep and bear arms. Now, this was defined by Samuel Johnson in the 1700s as to retain or not to lose.
Sorry, it's been a little bit since Dave Bush. Who's Samuel Johnson?
Samuel Johnson was in Webster's dictionary, I believe, and he defined it in that dictionary as to keep, to retain or not to lose.
So is he any sort of equal scholar, any sort of founding father? He just got it, wrote in the dictionary.
No, Your Honor, he's not a legal scholar. However, this was understood in the District of Columbia v. Heller as the definition of to keep and bear arms, which is why it's applicable in this case. Now, because he defined it as such, in this act, it states that it may cease any firearms sold contrary to it. This is not restricting the sale. This is threatening to take away the firearms of American citizens if they are found unfit to have one. Now, this is completely infringing on the Second Amendment rights to keep and bear arms. There has never in history been an act or a licensing law that will cease the firearms after they have been sold. However, that is what this act is threatening to do. Now,
Could you elaborate on what you mean by cease the firearms after they're being sold?
yes, Your Honor. In this act, in the plain text, it states that if it finds that a firearm has been sold contrary to it, that it will take away the gun from the buyer of it. Now, this has never been done in history, which makes it unconstitutional. As in Bruin, it stated that historical precedent is necessary to deem an act constitutional.
Are there not laws already on the books that would take guns away from someone who, for example, has been convicted of a felony?
Your Honor, there may be the case where in a certain situation, someone would have their gun revoked in the case of a significant reason. However, in Bruin, it stated that there is significant reasons needed in order to deem someone unfit to have a firearm. But moving back into the act itself, it doesn't always have significant reasons or definite standards.
Are there any specific stipulations within the act that you are insignificant so as to not fall under Bruin standard?
Your Honor, if I'm understanding your question correctly, there are certain clauses in this act and in the definitions of unfitness that lack proper, definite, and narrow standards. And because of this, they are undefined and they're let up to the discretion of the seller. Now, specifically, I'd like to talk about the general trait of character as a safe, cautious, and law-abiding citizen. Now, law-abiding citizen does have historical precedents, as we can see in colonial America, where if people wanted the firearms for the purpose of terror, right, they would not be granted them. We can also see this through Reconstruction era America, through antebellum America, and through modern America. However, general trait of character as a safe and cautious person is not quantifiable, and it is a subjective standard. Because this act is totality of the circumstances, this does not necessarily mean that if someone doesn't have a general trait of character, that they will be completely denied firearms. However, because this act is so subjective in its terms, and because it doesn't say how much weight to put on each of these, as plaintiff mentioned, 9 different categories listed, there's a lot of discretion let up to the seller, which leaves it with the appraisal of facts and the formation of an opinion. Now, we have to compare this act with licensing law, because licensing laws historically are the only things that have had commercial sales of firearms being restricted. And licensing laws have to have narrow, objective, and definite standards, not the appraisal of facts and the formation of an opinion. However, because that is what this act is asking you to do, form an opinion based on what you think this person's general trait of character is, this act is unconstitutional and it does not follow any kind of historical precedent. Because of this, the defense urges you to deny the plaintiff's motion and sustain Shooting Star's constitutional objections to the Responsible Firearms Sales Practices Act. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. What was the plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor. Now, the plaintiff agrees that the Second Amendment does encompass.
Here, let's stop for a second. You can start from the beginning in 9 seconds. I don't know what's going on there. Right, you may proceed.
Now, the plaintiff agrees that the Second Amendment does encompass the commercial right to sell a firearm. However, as stated in Heller, firearm retailers are subject to proper regulations and legislation. Additionally, opposing counsel mentioned how the RFSPA in question infringes on individual rights. The act does not infringe on individual rights. If a person is unable to purchase a firearm through the RFSPA, nothing restricts them from obtaining a federal license and simply going to another state to purchase a firearm. And in the more extreme, they can also obtain a firearm through things like
Would it not be a crime to purchase a firearm legally in a state and then bring it illegally into a state which they otherwise would not be allowed to purchase that firearm?
No, because they can apply for a federal license to allow them to do so. Additionally, opposing counsel mentioned how the criteria of the RFSPA are simply too broad. Now, I would like to point out that the 2 semi-discretionary criteria are subjective, but they're based on objective standards.
Regardless of whether they're based on objective standards, how do you respond to the counsel's point that because there's no weight given to any of the 9 criteria, how is the government supposed to weigh which is the most important of these criteria, regardless of whether they're objective, semi-objective, or objective?
Well, the plaintiff would argue that there are weight given to certain components. Specifically, 77% of the statute is determined through a fact check basis. 7 out of the 9 can be checked through a simple
That's assuming that those are weighted, right?
Yes, Your Honor.
Is there any guarantee that all 9 of those give the same weight?
Yes, Your Honor. Specifically, the plaintiff is a place of contention that if a user passes more components of the RFSPA and they fail, then they will be suitable to use a firearm. So they're all weighted equally and determined whether or not someone passes more components than they fail.
Is there a specific element in the statute that says that they are all weighted equally?
Well, specifically, the wording of totality implies that if the user has more qualifications than the ones they fail, then they'll be given a firearm.
It's just you have to pass more than you fail. So
Yes.
if you get 5, 4, then that's fine.
Yes, Your Honor. Barring extreme cases where if a user has a previous terrorist affiliation, then that's a federal violation.
So some of those are, if you fail this, you fail entirely, but others, it's just a 5 and 4 is fine.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
For those reasons, the plaintiff asks to accept this motion to eliminate and allow exhibits 16, 17, and 18 to be made available for use of trial. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, in 3 minutes or less, I will issue the court's ruling. During this time, please remain in the room. You may only speak with the students on your team that are participating in the trial. Time for 3 minutes on the clock. It's going to be the whole 3 minutes. Thank you, counsel, for your arguments. Based on the argument presented today, the court is going to deny the plaintiff's motion and eliminate. Accordingly, the court finds that 20 Imperion Code Section 2007, the Responsible Firearms and Practices Act, as applied to this case, is unconstitutional. Just to give you a brief bit of context behind this ruling, I definitely understand the plaintiff's arguments that they set out 9 criteria, many of which are objective or semi-objective. But if you're going to set out, 9 different criteria, it's pretty clear proven that you have to find historical analogs for those. And without any sort of clear criteria, either in the statute or in historical analogs, for how all 9 of those criteria are supposed to be weighed, the court finds that this specific statute is unconstitutionally vague. All right, since the court has denied the motion, Justice Carbo's second cause of action is dismissed with prejudice and will not proceed in trial. Accordingly, Exhibit 16, 17, 18 are excluded from evidence under Imperial Evidence Ordinance 402. This concludes the pretrial argument. The court is ready to proceed to trial. But before we begin this trial, I'll give parties an opportunity to handle some brief housekeeping matters. Let's start with the plaintiff.
Yes, Your Honor. First and foremost, the plaintiff was wondering what your specific preferences would be for free use of the well, as well as approaching witnesses and the jury. Would you like us to ask for permission or to allow us to roam around freely as
Feel free to move around freely. However, when you are approaching an opposed witness, please just ask for permission.
Yes, Your Honor. Additionally, pursuant to Rule 615, all witnesses in this case, with the exception of the party represented, Justice Carbo, must be constructively sequestered upon a motion made by either party. The plaintiff would like to raise that motion now.
Is that your understanding as well, counsel?
Yes, Your Honor. Although we would also like to exclude Skylar Coleman, our party representative, from the.
All right, so far.
Your Honor, the plaintiff has prepared a character evidence intent form, which has been reviewed and been approved by opposing counsel. Would Your Honor like a copy of that?
Yes.
Okay. Furthermore, we have prepared a binder full of evidence of all authenticated exhibits, simply for the jury and for the witness and for Your Honor yourself if you would like one. May we proceed to put one on the witness stand as well as your own bench if you would like one?
Has opposing counsel seen and signed this?
Yes.
All right, please proceed.
No further housekeeping matters for the plaintiff, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
All right, let's begin, but first, let's let the jury know we'll take a moment after the statement or examination, just so we have a chance to submit our scores, make sure we get all the comments done, and get it into the text. All right, Justice Carbo, you may begin your opening statement.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court. Carelessness is not a coincidence. On May 28th, 2022, Justice Carbo walked into Shooting Star hoping to purchase a gun and learn how to use it. But rather than walking away with the ability to shoot, she was the one who ended up getting shot. Not by an intruder, not by a robber, but by Shooting Star Gun Club's own employee, Drew Cantrell. Shooting Star Gun Club is a local gun range and shop in Imperion, supposedly known for being the best of the best. So when Justice Carbo, a local resident of Imperion, saw advertisements for Shooting Star go out, she thought it would be the perfect place for someone as inexperienced as herself to find just what she was looking for. However, Shooting Star is not what it made itself out to be. You'll learn today that Skylar Coleman, the owner, failed to uphold the basics of customer care, and that she trusted Drew Cantrell, a criminal, with the safety of her customers. Skylar Coleman's carelessness in hiring Cantrell became clear when Cantrell broke two of the most basic rules of gun safety. But even after these incidents, Skylar Coleman didn't fire him. Instead, she promoted him, the one who had unsafely used guns, to teach others how to safely use their guns. Now, rules are in place to keep people safe. But when rules are broken multiple times, there are consequences. And that became all too apparent on May 28th when Justice Carbo walked into Shooting Star for her gun safety training session. As her instructor, Drew Cantrell, pointed the gun at the target, he suddenly flinched. The gun recoiled, and he shot Justice Carbo. It was not the first, not the second, but the third time that Drew Cantrell misused guns within Shooting Star. But the worst part is that Skylar Coleman never stopped this pattern. And thus, it will become clear that Skylar Coleman and Shooting Star's carelessness on May 28th caused the irreversible injuries to Justice Carbo. Today, the plaintiff charges Shooting Star Gun Club with one count of negligence. In order to prove this charge, we must establish that 1, Shooting Star Gun Club hired Drew Cantrell, that 2, Drew Cantrell was or became unfit or incompetent to perform the work for which he was hired, that 3, Shooting Star knew or should have known that Drew Cantrell's incompetence or unfitness created a particular risk to others, and 4, that Drew Cantrell's unfitness or incompetence harmed Justice Carbo. In order to prove this charge, we only have to prove that each of these elements is more likely true than not, 51 to 49%. And at the end of today's trial, we will have met that burden in full. To do that, you will hear from 3 witnesses. First, you'll hear from Justice Carbo, a firearms novice and a proponent of gun safety. Justice Carbo will explain that throughout her experience with Shooting Star, they failed to uphold the basis of customer care and did not uphold the advertisements that they had promised. Next, you'll hear from Ross Hernandez, a local business owner and regular at the Shooting Star gun range in Baltimore. Mr. Hernandez will testify to Skylar Coleman's desire to rapidly expand his business and the irresponsible shortcuts she took in order to achieve that goal. And finally, you will hear from Dr. Morgan Judd, an expert in firearm safety. Dr. Judd will testify to Drew Cantrell's dangerous behaviors within Shooting Star and to Shooting Star's carelessness in hiring and retaining her. Throughout today's trial, you will find that the events on May 28th were entirely under Shooting Star's control. But when reckless behaviors become a pattern, carelessness is not a coincidence. At the end of today's trial, my co-counsel Sahana Sriram will ask that you find Shooting Star Gun Club liable for negligence. Thank you.
Jury ready? Counsel for Shooting Star Gun Club.
Your Honor, permission to settle our motion.
You may. As opposing counsel, see Mr. Monster.
Yes, Your Honor.
Sorry. Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury, numbers don't lie. 2 forms of safety certification, 6 months of safe firearm instruction, hundreds of classes taught, with 0 issue. Opposing counsel just told you that carelessness is not coincidence. The members of the jury, throughout this trial, you will learn just how much Skylar Pullman cared about safety. You see, it was the numbers, the facts, that Skylar Pullman knew of Drew Cantrell. Numbers don't lie, so why would it be unreasonable to trust them? Shooting Star Gun Club is a small business in West Pascal and Purion, where locals can purchase guns, practice target shooting, and learn more about gun safety. Of course, I don't need to tell you how divisive firearm culture is in modern America. This is why Skylar Pullman had a vision to create an inclusive and safe environment for firearm enthusiasts, novices, and non-firearm owners alike. This is exactly what he did for 15 years. June of 2020, Drew Cantrell was hired as sales clerk at Shooting Star. His charisma and people skills filled this role perfectly, sending a good impression to Miss Pullman. 2 forms, safety certification, 1 firearm safety certificate, 1 firearm instructor certificate, both issued by the Imperial Department of Justice. These are what Miss Pullman referenced when Drew Cantrell asked to be promoted to firearm safety instructor in August of 2020. These 2 certificates are what Drew Cantrell needed for this job. That number doesn't lie. So Miss Cantrell was promoted. This case involves a claim of negligence, that Drew Cantrell failed to act with reasonable care. You've just heard the plaintiff tell you that they must prove this claim by preponderance of the evidence, or more likely than not. Now, in order to prevail, the plaintiff must establish 3 things. First, that Drew Cantrell negligently injured Justice Carbo on May 28, 2022. Second, that Shooting Star Gun Club was likewise negligent in hiring and retaining Mr. Cantrell, as he had failed to show competence. And third, that Shooting Star's negligence was a direct and foreseeable cause of Justice Carbo's injury. Members of the jury, the facts of this case simply do not support the plaintiff's claims. Today, you are going to hear from defense witness Drew Cantrell. He is going to tell you about an incident in May of 2021. Mr. Cantrell was inspecting an unloaded firearm pointed at the shop floor. To his surprise, Skylar Pullman came in furious at him for pointing this firearm at another person. Skylar Pullman is going to testify as to how she didn't actually see where Mr. Cantrell pointed this firearm. But despite this, Despite not being sure, Skylar Pullman acted immediately, urgently repairing any potential breaches in safety protocol. November of 2021. Mr. Cantrell was leaving the shooting range. Still holding a loaded firearm, he was intending to unload it inside. Miss Coleman immediately reprimanded Drew Cantrell for the violation of safety, explaining that rules exist for a reason. Miss Coleman intended to follow them. Mr. Cantrell taught hundreds of firearm safety courses 6 months before the May 28, 2022 incident, consistently proving himself to not only have learned, but excelled due to his mistake. Hundreds of firearm safety classes, not a single issue. Members of the jury, the plaintiff will be unable to provide a single piece of evidence, a single number that proves otherwise. Considering this, we will ask the plaintiff, what more do you want? If 6 months of safe firearm instruction is not enough, what is? A year, 2 years, 5 years? And if effectively and safely teaching hundreds of firearm safety courses not enough, how many is? The defense asks that throughout today's trial, you consider the numbers. 2 safety certificates, 6 months of safe firearm instruction, hundreds of classes taught, 0 issue. Numbers don't lie. And so at the end of this trial, my co-counsel, Naomi Oltmans, will ask that you find Shooting Star Gun Club not liable.
Thank you, counsel.
Having issue with my ballot.
All right, we'll just take a quick recess until we're able to
Yeah, like it's
get us started. I think we're having some ballot trouble.
It's probably about a 3-minute recess to get this restarted, Your Honor.
All right, we'll take a 3-minute recess.
Your Honor, permission to move the podium.
Yeah, of course.
It's shorter than I thought. Looks like we're all good.
All right, let's call this case back to order. Plaintiff, are you ready to present your case in chief?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the plaintiff called the cargo to the stand. May I proceed?
You may.
Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself to the court.
Good afternoon.
My name is Justice Carbo.
And Ms. Carbo, why are you here today?
I was shot at Shooting Star Gun Club by one of their instructors on May 28th of 2022.
Let's discuss that incident with Shooting Star Gun Club. How did that all get started?
It all started when I needed to buy a gun for self-defense. I love Imperion, but things in my area got pretty dangerous. My car had been broken into 3 times in the last few years, but the really terrifying moment was when I was robbed while walking home one night. It got to the point where I didn't feel safe in my own home.
And what, if any, prior experience do you have with guns?
I have no prior experience. I'm a complete beginner with firearms. That's why I wanted to go to Shooting Star.
And how exactly did you hear about Shooting Star in the first place?
Well, I heard about them through word of mouth, and they have a very catchy advertisement. It seemed like they had everything I needed. I could purchase a gun and take a safety course. Safety was my top priority.
Now, you mentioned seeing an advertisement for Shooting Star Gun Club. Would you recognize that advertisement if I were to show it to you?
I would.
Let the record reflect that pages that my own counsel is now displaying. Texture is now displaying an exhibit marked as Exhibit 12, which is the advertisement as I've indicated previously. And could you let me know once that's on your screen, Ms. Carbo?
It's there.
And what is this in front of you?
This is the advertisement I saw about Shooting Star.
Has it been altered or changed in any way since last time you've seen it?
No, it doesn't.
At this time, the plaintiff moves to enter Exhibit 12 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
So entered.
Now, Ms. Carbo, I'd like to direct your attention to that clip starting at 14 seconds. If my co-counsel could hit play on that. Apologies, is the volume up on that?
It is not.
Could you turn it up, please? Your Honor, members of the jury, I believe there may be some technical issues regarding having to mute so that my witness may be able to watch the exhibit. Could you hit play on that one more time?
We've been family owned and operated for 30 years, and nothing is more important to us than keeping you and your family safe. Not only do we stop over 400 rifles, handguns, and shotguns, but we'll need to teach you how to use them. That's right, at Shooting Star, you can train with one of our expert instructors who will teach you how to exercise your Second Amendment rights safely and responsibly. It'll be like learning acting from Meryl Streep or basketball from Michael Jordan. You'll be shooting like a star in no time.
So, Ms. Carbo, after watching this advertisement, what were your thoughts about Shooting Star?
Well, I thought that Shooting Star had everything I needed. Experts in the field of firearm safety was just what I was looking for.
And what, if anything, did you do after watching this advertisement?
After watching the advertisement, I reached out to the owner, Skylar Coleman, through email. I just needed to make sure that Shooting Star was the right fit.
And can you describe your interaction through email and how you felt about that?
Well, I asked a lot of very specific questions, and I made it very clear to her that I was a complete beginner with guns. But I didn't really see the responses I was looking for. They were kind of vague and didn't really give me the knowledge I was looking for.
So after getting these responses, or these vague responses as you just stated, what, if any, further action did you take?
Well, I just decided to go in person, as Ms. Coleman suggested.
And can you describe what happened when you went down to Shooting Star in person?
Of course. I went down there and I had to fill out some paperwork, and Ms. Coleman spent a while with me going over gun safety and handling.
And did she end up recommending a specific gun to you?
She did. She recommended the Glock 22. She said it was a great gun for beginners.
And overall, how did you feel about your interaction with Skylar?
I felt a lot better about my interaction in person than I did over email.
And was there anything in specific about that interaction that you didn't feel as well about?
Well, Ms. Coleman did put on a very good sales pitch, but there were some red flags that, looking back, I missed in the moment.
What do you mean by red flags that you missed?
Well, Ms. Coleman never asked me where I plan to store or how I plan to use the firearm.
And aside from that, were there any other red flags that you had missed?
There was a pretty big one. Ms. Coleman never asked me if I wanted safety training. I had to ask for it myself. And she kind of laughed and then responded saying that it was up to me, but if I really wanted to be safe, she could throw something together.
Now, Ms. Carbo, can you tell the court why it is that you wanted those safety training sessions?
Of course. I just needed to know how to use how to handle a gun if I was in the position that I had to. I didn't want to hurt anyone around me.
And were you ever able to end up receiving those course sessions?
I planned a safety course for 2 weeks later, in which I would come back and finalize my purchase and take the safety course.
What day was it when you came back in?
That was May 20th. It's a day I'll never forget.
So let's talk about that day, May 28th, 2022. What happened when you walked into Shooting Star?
Well, I met with Miss Coleman, and I had to fill out the same government form I filled out my last visit.
And what, if anything, happened after that?
Well, after that, Miss Coleman said she had to run a background check. So she went into the back room and then she came back out a few minutes later and said I was good to go, which was surprising to me.
Why was that surprising to you?
Well, she never offered my safety training that I had scheduled 2 weeks prior. So I asked her about it and she said, "Oh, right."
And after she responded by saying, "Oh, right," what, if anything, else happened?
Another employee walked out of the back. Their name was Drew Cantrell. Miss Coleman introduced me to them and told me that they would be my safety instructor.
And how, if at all, did Drew Cantrell respond to that?
Mr. Trell said, "Oh, yeah, right," and then picked the gun up off the counter and told me to follow him into the range.
And after hearing both Coleman and Cantrell's responses, how did you feel?
To be honest, I was a little confused. I had scheduled the training 2 weeks earlier, and I was confused as to why it was so disorganized.
Now let's move on to that training session itself. Would you recognize a copy of that stall where it took place if I were to show it to you?
I would.
Let the record reflect that I'm now approaching opposing counsel and in turn the witness with a copy of listed 3 marked as Exhibit 2G. And Ms. Carbo, if you could just turn to Exhibit 2G in that binder.
There.
What is this in front of you?
This is a picture of stalls 11 and 12, where myself, Drew Cantrell, and Nick Allred were standing.
And does it appear to be a fair and accurate copy?
It is.
Has it been altered or changed in any way since the last time you've seen it?
It hasn't.
At this time, the plaintiff moves to enter Exhibit 2G into evidence.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
So entered.
Let the record reflect that I am now publishing this exhibit to the jury as well. Ms. Carbo, can you describe what happened once you reached the stall?
Of course. After Mr. Cantrell went over a basic gun safety demonstration, they positioned myself and Nick Allred where to stand. I was to stand behind Drew Cantrell, just a little bit to their right, and then Nick Allred a bit to my right.
And at any point, did Mr. Cantrell tell you to move from where you were standing?
No, never.
Did you ever ask him if you were standing in the incorrect position?
I didn't. I trusted Mr. Cantrell.
Thank you. You can put that exhibit off to the side now. So, aside from just telling you where to stand, what, if any, other instructions did Mr. Cantrell give you?
Well, Mr. Cantrell said to focus on his hands and not see where the bullet went.
And while you were focusing on his hands, did you notice anything?
Well, just before firing the first shot, Mr. Cantrell made some sort of sudden movement, and then the first shot was fired. But then the gun swung around, and it was pointed directly at me. That's when Mr. Cantrell knocked into me.
And what happened after he knocked into you?
The gun pointed downward, and the second shot went off. Bullet hit my leg. There was so much blood, and I was in so much pain. I could barely think.
And Ms. Carbo, what, if any, actions have you taken since you got shot?
Well, I've started an organization, and it helps survivors of gun violence. I filed a lawsuit.
Let's talk about that lawsuit a little bit more. Who's it filed against?
It's filed against Shooting Star Gun Club.
Why is it filed against Shooting Star Gun Club and not Drew Cantrell?
Well, at first, on the advice of my attorneys, I filed a joint lawsuit against Shooting Star Gun Club and Drew Cantrell. But Drew and I came to a settlement. Shooting Star and I didn't.
So if you agreed to settle with Drew Cantrell, then how come you're still taking further action to sue Shooting Star?
I don't want anyone to have to experience what I did.
Thank you, Your Honor. There are no further questions at this time.
All right, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Carbo, before May 14th, 2022, you had never held a firearm before in your entire life, correct?
That's correct. I never even touched one.
But you wanted one for self-defense reasons.
I did.
So you went to Shooting Star Gun Club
That's right.
because of some great reviews you found online, right?
I'd also heard through word of mouth and seen their advertisement that Shooting Star was the place to go.
And you decided to go in person because of some great reviews, correct?
Yes, I did.
When you arrived at Shooting Star, even though you had never held a firearm before in your entire life, Skylar Coleman made you feel reassured.
Well, she did. She reassured me that buying a firearm was the right thing to do if I wanted to keep myself safe.
Miss Coleman made you feel at ease.
She did.
You trusted Miss Coleman.
Yes,
She personally spent over an hour with you, correct?
she did.
In this hour, she went over safe firearm handling
That's right.
and safe firearm storage,
Yes, she did.
and she had you fill out the necessary paperwork needed for owning a firearm.
That's right. She had me fill out a government form.
And finally, you both agreed that you would come back on May 28th, 2022 to take a firearm safety course.
Yes, that's what we agreed on.
When you came back on May 28th, you were told you'd be taking this course with Drew Cantrell, correct?
Yes, Drew Cantrell was supposed to be my firearm safety instructor.
To begin this course, Mr. Cantrell went over some basic firearm safety, right?
That's right.
Like, don't point a firearm at another person.
That's correct.
And he demonstrated this rule by pointing his firearm at the floor.
Yes,
He also told you to treat every gun as if it's loaded.
yes,
And he demonstrated this rule by pulling out the drawer in the gun to show that the gun was loaded.
that's right.
And he also told you to not put your finger on the trigger of the gun until you're ready to shoot.
Yes,
And he demonstrated this by keeping his finger outside of the trigger until he was shooting the gun.
that's correct.
Finally, I'd like to discuss the reasons why we're in court today. You originally sued both Drew Cantrell and Shooting Star Gun Club, correct?
I did. I filed a joint lawsuit on the advice of my attorneys.
But you settled with Drew Cantrell.
I did.
You settled for $20 million, correct?
That's correct.
Ms. Carville, have you received this $20 million?
I have, yes.
So having received $20 million, you now intend to take every penny from Shooting Star Gun Club, isn't that right?
That's right.
You intend to do this even if it's the last thing you do, correct, Ms. Carbo?
That's right.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, counsel. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Brief redirect.
All right.
Now, Ms. Carbo, opposing counsel asked you whether or not you intend to take every penny from Shooting Star if it's the last thing you do, especially in regards to already receiving that settlement. Why are you continuing to sue Shooting Star even though you've received a settlement offer?
I don't want anyone to go through what I did. It was a horrible experience.
Thank you, Your Honor. There are no further questions at this time.
All right, recross. All
No recross, Your Honor.
right, you may be excused. Foreign judges, let me know when you're ready. All good? All right, thank you. Please call your next witness.
At this time, the plaintiff calls Ross Hernandez. Please.
May I proceed? You may. Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself for the court.
Hey everyone, my name is Ross Hernandez and I'm a small business owner in Imperial.
Could you tell us a little bit more about your business?
Yeah, it's a jewelry shop called Ross's Rings in a strip mall in West Pascal. I mean, it's truly my pride and joy. I mean, I love it here. It's such a great community and I couldn't imagine running a shop anywhere else.
You mentioned it's a great community. What, if anything, stood out to you there?
Gosh, there's so many, but if I had to choose one, I would say Shooting Star, the local gun range and shop. I mean, they've always maintained a welcoming environment, and they've really gotten to know the owner, Skylar Coleman.
What's your relationship with Skylar Coleman?
And I would say we're close business acquaintances. I mean, he helps me with my business, and I help her in return. I mean, I've really been able to see her expanding her business over the last few years.
And how has Skylar Coleman been expanding her business?
I've seen advertisements all around town of Shooting Star.
Would you recognize a copy of those advertisements that we were shipping to you?
Yes.
Let the record reflect that I'm approaching opposing counsel and turn the witness to the copy of what has been previously marked as Exhibit 22.
Now, Ms. Hernandez, what is the document?
This is a copy of the advertisements I've seen around town of Shooting Star.
Is it a fair and accurate copy?
Yes.
Has it been altered or changed in any way since the last time you've seen it?
No.
At this time, the plaintiff moves to enter Exhibit 22 in evidence. Any objection?
Yes, objection to relevance.
All right, please state why this is not relevant.
Your Honor, the advertisements in this exhibit are of no consequence in determining any action in this case.
On counsel, Your Honor, if I may, it's the plaintiff's belief the focus of Skylar Coleman on growing her own business and expanding her business provides sufficient motive for her lack of care in administering her business to a full degree of safety, which is our it's expressed motive and cause of action today. And how is the advertisement specifically related to growing that business? Specifically, the advertisement is intended to promote Shooting Star Gun Club as a means of opposing the Imperial firearms ban and promoting the sale of get your guns before it's too late, if I may proffer, Your Honor, which is an expression of that intent to grow the business.
Your Honor, if the intent is to show the motive of Skylar Coleman, then there is also a lack of personal knowledge with this witness. Mr. Hernandez cannot testify to the motive of Skylar Coleman.
Your Honor, if I may proffer, briefly, I believe this witness will testify to Skylar Coleman's express statements regarding this advertisement, which would offer her insight into the motives of Skylar Coleman, specifically with respect to this matter. Relevance is a low bar, so I'm going to allow the testimony, but if you find that this foundation is being laid over the course of the direct examination, feel free to reread the lack of foundation or no. Permission intended to the jury, Your Honor. Yes, you. Now, Ms. Hernandez, what stood out to you in this advertisement?
Well, if you take a look at the second advertisement, they'll say, Imperion, get your guns before it's too late. I mean, this particularly stood out to me because Skylar has mentioned similar ideas.
And what specifically did Skylar Coleman mention?
Well, when these advertisements were first around town, I asked Skylar, I mean, why she decided to put these advertisements up, more so that I could learn from them. And she told me that she was looking to put guns in the hands of every Imperion citizen.
Now, you can set that exhibit off to the side. Does Shooting Star offer anything besides the gun store and range?
Yeah, Skylar added a tavern inside the Shooting Star, which is called Shooter McTaverns. It's a place for people to stop by and get some lunch or a drink. I go there 4 times a week just for lunch since it's close to my shop.
Where specifically is Shooter McTaverns located within Shooting Star?
It's to the right of the entrance and directly leads into the gun shop.
Objection relevance.
Right, explain.
Your Honor, the Shooter McTaverns location star is again of no consequence for determining any.
Your Honor, if I may. Yes, ma'am. Specifically, this witness has clarified that most of the time she spends at Shooting Star is in Shooter McTaverns as a business owner. Therefore, I'm merely establishing the causal link between working in Shooter McTaverns and still having knowledge of the gun store's operations. It's merely laying foundation for that knowledge of how the gun store works in a general. So you're saying the witness, it knows how the gun store will be, like they're in proximity as the taverns in part? Yes, it's establishing why the witness frequents the gun store, and it's establishing that causal link. Response?
I believe that has already been established and we can move on from the point.
All right, well, I'm going to overrule the objection, but if we can get off of that. Yes, Your Honor, of course. Now, Ms. Hernandez, once again, where specifically is Shooter McTaverns located within Shooting Star?
So it's to the right of the entrance and directly leads into the gun shop as well.
Now, what if any changes have you observed after Shooter McTaverns was added to Shooting Star?
I definitely noticed a lot of customers who I've never seen before check out both the tavern and the gun shop.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the staff at Shooting Star. What have your experiences been with them?
I would say I'm close friends with the majority of them, except for this one worker, Drew Cantrell. I mean, I actually try to avoid him whenever I can.
And why do you try to avoid Drew Cantrell?
Well, firstly, from what I've seen, he's the worst shot of all the instructors at Shooting Star. I mean, he has never hit the target and always misses to the right. Always misses to the right. He also isn't easy to get along with, and he's been involved in several incidents that have not helped his case.
When specifically did these incidents occur?
There were two in 2021, one in May and one in November, and a little bit later there was one in May of 2022.
Now let's talk about that first incident in May of 2021. What specifically happened?
I was at the shop that day just chatting with a client, and I hear some kind of fight behind me. So I turn around and I see Drew in a heated argument with another worker. He was holding a gun by his side, and he seemed to get more and more aggressive until he pointed the gun directly at the other worker.
So Cantrell pointed a gun at another worker. How did everyone else react?
Everyone was completely silent. Everyone except for Skylar. I have never heard her yell that loud. She just told everyone to settle down and led Drew back into the office.
Now, you mentioned there was another incident in November of 2021. But what specifically happened in that case?
I wasn't, this was a little bit different because I didn't directly see the situation, but I was close enough to hear it. I heard Skylar yelling Drew's name a few times about him bringing a loaded gun from the gun range to the sales counter.
And what, if anything, now, how did these incidents impact your impression of Shooting Star?
I definitely don't feel the same sense of security as I did before. I've been Shooting Star for as long as I can remember, and always hoped that they would learn from these incidents. However, after what happened on May 28th, 2022, I don't think I could ever go back.
What happened on May 28th?
I wasn't at the shop that day, so I just heard about the horrible incident that Justice Carbo was shot. I was already worried about the incidents that happened before, but after what happened, I couldn't help but worry about what could happen next.
No. Ms. Hernandez, what was your impression of this incident?
As a business owner in Empyrean, when things like this happen, I can't be sure of the security of my clients, my family, and most importantly, my community. I just hope that nothing ever happens like this ever again.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions. Thanks. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Hernandez. You go down to Shooting Star about 4 times a week, right?
Yes, that is correct.
And despite your time spent there, you don't know much about guns.
Yeah, I would say I'm not really that familiar with guns. However, I've been at the shop multiple times.
You might know a lot about jewelry, but you are a complete gun novice.
Yes, that is correct. However, I do know some basic rules.
On direct examination, you mentioned an incident in May of 2021 involving Mr. Contrell.
Yes, that is correct.
During that incident, everyone went silent, correct?
Yes,
Everyone went silent except for Miss Coleman, right?
yes, that is correct.
You saw Miss Coleman immediately reprimand and stop Mr. Contrell.
Yeah, I mean, from what Drew was doing, I'm sure that it was reasonable for her to.
Miss Coleman also approached you to document what happened.
That is correct.
You testified about another incident in November of 2021 involving Mr. Contrell.
Yes,
However, you only overheard this incident and did not see it happen.
yes, that is correct. However, I was at the shop and could hear what they were saying.
You had to put two and two together based only on what you heard.
Yes,
And what you heard was Miss Coleman correcting Mr. Contrell.
that is correct.
So for both these incidents, as far as you could tell, Miss Coleman handled the situation.
Yes, I would say so.
And as far as where neither incident was ever repeated.
Yeah, not that I recall.
Moving on, you enjoy most of the people at Shooting Star, don't you?
Yeah, I would say I'm close friends with the majority of them.
Including Miss Coleman.
Yes,
However, there is one person you cannot stand, Drew Contrell.
yes, I mean, I definitely think we have some personality differences.
You claimed Mr. Contrell isn't even a good shot.
Yes, that is correct.
However, you have only seen them shoot 2 to 3 times.
Yeah, and from both the incidents that happened, he has always missed the target and always to the right.
Was that a yes to my question?
Yes,
And you have never shot a gun yourself.
yes,
As far as you were aware, in none of the times you saw them shoot, was there any safety violation that occurred?
sorry, could you repeat your question?
As far as you were aware, there was no safety violation that occurred in.
Objection, Your Honor, specifically to grounds of improper opinion. If I may, there are safety experts who may be offered at trial who could offer an opinion on the nature of safety procedure and safety protocol. However, this witness, as a lay witness, would have no ability to testify to that information.
Response?
Your Honor, I am simply asking if Mr. Hernandez has observed any safety violations as far as they are aware of in the time they testified that they saw them shoot.
Response?
And Your Honor, it's specifically the characterization of those incidents as safety violations with which the plaintiff takes issue, because that's a conclusion that would be reserved for an expert witness in the field of firearms safety, as we are going into this.
Response, defense, final response.
I am only asking with the use of safety violations as far as they are aware of.
While the witness can testify to what they specifically observed, the characterization of their observations as potential safety violations, I believe tends to fall into the realm of expert testimony, so for that reason, we will sustain.
Ms. Hernandez, you have no first-hand knowledge of the accident that occurred on May 28th, 2022.
Yeah, I don't have a firsthand account, however, I heard about what happened.
So just to summarize, Ms. Hernandez, the last apparent issue by Mr. Contrell was in November of 2021, prior to May 28th.
Yes, that is correct.
And from that point until the Miss Carbo accident, in those 6 months, you are aware of no issues involving Mr. Contrell.
Yeah, not that I can recall it.
In that time, you are aware of no injuries caused by Mr. Contrell,
Yes, that is correct.
despite you shooting star frequently during that time.
Yes,
In fact, in your entire time spent at Shooting Star, you're not aware of a single injury prior to May 28th, 2022.
sorry, could you repeat the question?
In your entire time spent at Shooting Star, you're not aware of a single injury prior to May 28th.
Yes, I can't recall injury, however, there were several incidents, like I mentioned before, that occurred.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, any redirect?
No reader.
All right, you may be excused.
Oh, my bad, sorry.
No, you're
I'm
good.
like always good. I just like to type extra, just.
No, that's good. Typing extra is good. All right, does the plaintiff have another witness?
Yes, Your Honor, this time the plaintiff calls Dr. Morgan Judd to stand. Good evening, could you please introduce yourself to the court?
Hello, my name is Dr. Morgan Judd.
Now, could you tell the court a little bit about your educational background?
Yes, of course, I received a PhD in public policy from Tulane University and an MS in statistics from Auburn University.
Now, let's talk about what you do for a living. Where, if at all, do you currently work?
Well, currently, I work as an associate professor in the Center for Gun Violence Prevention at Imperial State University School of Public Health. I also hold posts as a fellow at the Brookings Institution and Everytown for Gun Safety.
And what, if any, training or experience do you have in gun safety?
Well, I was an investigator at the Bureau of Alcohol and Tobacco for about a decade, and during my time there, I received extensive training in the use of various firearms and helped investigate criminals who traffic illegal firearms. I also hold a firearm safety certificate, which was issued by the Imperial Department of Justice.
And are you being compensated for your work today?
Yes, I am. I charge a standard rate of $600 per hour for being here in court today and $400 per hour for working on the case. I have spent a total of 36 hours and billed a total of $14,400 to Justice Carbo. I also charge a flat fee of $6,000 and reimbursement for all traveling and living-related expenses.
And have you come to any conclusions in this case based on sufficient facts and data?
Yes.
And did you come to these conclusions using means and methods relied upon within your field?
Yes, beyond the extensive exhibits and affidavits provided to me by plaintiff counsel, I applied my knowledge of the best practices for firearm safety, an industry standard, in order to come to my conclusions in this case.
Your Honor, pursuant to stipulation 12, the plaintiff now tenders Dr. Morgan Judd as an expert in the field of firearm safety.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
All right, so tender.
Now let's talk about your investigation. How did you become involved in this case?
Well, I was initially approached by Justice Carbo back in January regarding the shooting star case. I then agreed to a consultation free of charge and conducted an analysis of the case in addition to writing a report.
And where did you begin your report?
Well, I started by reviewing the affidavits and exhibits from the individuals involved in the case. I then proceeded to examine the circumstances and to determine whether or not the safety protocols adhere to the best practices for firearm safety.
Now, before we go any further, let's take a step back. What are the best practices for firearm safety?
Well, there are 5 best practices, but I found that there were 3 that were especially applicable to this case. The first rule, that firearms should always be kept unloaded except when in use. The second rule, that firearms should never be pointed at another person unless intended. And the 5th rule, that a firearm user should always be aware of their target before firing. These rules are all implemented to help prevent accidents and are very similar to the ones listed in the gun range.
Now let's talk about the first rule, that a firearm should always be kept unloaded except when in use. How can that be applied to this case?
Well, through my investigations, I became aware of an incident in November 2021 where Cantrell brought a loaded firearm from the range to the shop. This violated protocol number 1 because as soon as a firearm is no longer in use, it should be immediately unloaded because doing so lowers the risk of injury.
Now, the second rule, the careless aiming of a firearm. How does that pertain to the case at hand?
Well, through my investigations, I also became aware of an incident in May of 2021 where Cantrell aimed a firearm at another person at Shooting Star. Even if he believed it to be unloaded, this violates protocol number 2. Never intentionally aim a firearm at anyone. Failure to do so can lead to accidental firings, which can lead to serious injury or even death.
The fifth rule, that a firearm user should consistently be aware of their surroundings. Why is that relevant in this case?
Well, the fifth rule, the last rule of best practices for firearm safety, is to always be sure of a target before firing. It is imperative that firearm users are always aware of their surroundings in case they miss a target or shrapnel, bullet fragments, or even the bullet hits something or someone else. I was deeply disturbed by where Carbo was standing in relation to Cantrell and how Cantrell never instructed Carbo to keep a safe distance while he was teaching.
Would you recognize a photo of the stall where Carbo was standing in relation to Cantrell? I showed it to you.
Yes.
Let the record reflect that the plaintiff is now retrieving Exhibit 2G, which has already been admitted in evidence. Could you turn to Dr. Jack? Now, what did you notice about where Carbo was standing on May 20th?
Well, in this image, the red X shows where Carbo was standing, which is clearly unsafe because of how close he was to the gun. In this picture, you can also see that he's a few inches away from Cantrell, which means that Cantrell failed to follow the basic rule of being aware of his surroundings and should have checked his proximity before firing.
And why is it important that Cantrell should have checked his proximity before firing?
Well, eyewitness testimony reports that Cantrell likely flinched and lost control of the gun before firing, which would be an inexcusable error if that had indeed happened. Now, if Cantrell had maintained a safe distance from Justice Carbo, the incident could have been prevented altogether.
Thank you. Put that photo to the side. Now that we talked about the rules that Cantrell broke in his 2 incidents, let's talk about what Shooting Star did in reaction. Now, first of all, was Shooting Star aware of Cantrell's 2 rule-breaking incidents?
Well, to my knowledge, Shooting Star Gun Club was aware because a few days later, Skylar Coleman, the owner, issued a memorandum or formal warning to Drew Cantrell because of his behavior.
Would you recognize a copy of this memorandum? I showed it to you.
Yes.
Let the record reflect that I'm now approaching the closing counsel and from the witness, which was in 3 marks. Now, what's in front of you?
This is the memorandum issued to Drew Cantrell from Skylar Coleman.
Is it a fair and accurate copy?
Yes.
Has it been altered or changed since the last time you've seen it?
I don't believe so.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff moves to enter Exhibit 20, evidence.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
So entered.
Your Honor, the plaintiff also wishes to publish Exhibit 20 to the jury.
May.
And Dr. Judd, how many of Drew Cantrell's safety violations are detailed in this memorandum?
Well, 2 safety violations are issued in this memorandum. The first being the May 2021 incident where Cantrell aimed a firearm at another person, and the second being the November 2021 incident where Cantrell returned a firearm with the bullet still in the chamber.
And should a user with these violations be allowed to teach a safety course?
No, a firearms instructor should not be one who consistently violates best practices for firearm safety. It is my professional conclusion that Drew Cantrell should not have been teaching the courses on May 28th because of his previous rule-breaking incident.
Now, for sake of clarity, when was this memorandum issued?
Well, it seems that this memorandum is issued on November 18th, 2021, months before the incident on May 28th. This means that Shooting Star Gun Club was personally aware of Cantrell's incompetence as a safety instructor, but still allowed him to teach courses anyway.
And what, if any, disciplinary action did Shooting Star take after they became aware of Cantrell's 2 incidents?
To my knowledge, none. They didn't require him to attend any further training sessions or suspend him from his job. In fact, Shooting Star Gun Club still allowed him to teach safety courses and allowed him to proceed as a firearm safety instructor.
Thank you. Put that memorandum to the side. Now, based on Shooting Star's knowledge of Cantrell's two incidents and the rules that he broke, what are your conclusions regarding Drew Cantrell and Shooting Star Gun Club?
Well, through my investigations, it is evident that Shooting Star Gun Club disregarded Drew Cantrell's serious safety violations and allowed him to continue teaching safety courses, which ultimately led up to the incident on May 28th. I have concluded that the incident on May 28th could have been prevented through appropriate instruction, training courses, and practice, but Shooting Star evidently made an inadequate attempt to do so.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
All right, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Dr. Judd.
Good afternoon.
On direct examination, you mentioned that you hold a firearm safety certificate
Yes, I do.
issued by the Imperion Department of Justice.
Yes.
This is the same safety certificate that Drew Cantrell has.
Yes, it is.
In your expert report, you reference an incident in May of 2021.
Yes, I do.
Specifically, you state that Drew Cantrell admitted to pointing a firearm at another person.
Yes, that's what I researched and investigated.
That he intentionally did so?
Yes.
You have reviewed the affidavit of Drew Cantrell,
Yes, I have.
so you are aware that Mr. Cantrell claims this firearm was pointed at the shop floor.
Yes, but he also admitted that it was an intentional act.
That is yes to my question.
Yes.
You have also reviewed the affidavits of Avery Nguyen,
Yes.
Nick Alred,
Yes.
as well as the depositions of Skylar Coleman
Yes.
and Justice Carbo.
Yes.
And in none of these statements is it said that Mr. Cantrell admitted to pointing a firearm at another person,
Yes, but he still admitted it was an intentional act.
but not at another person.
No, but he still violated rule number 2.
You did not see this incident,
No, I didn't.
nor did you ever interview Mr. Cantrell about this incident.
No, I didn't, but I did read the affidavits.
Dr. Judd, you did not interview Mr. Cantrell at all.
No, I didn't.
I would like to talk about the May 28th, 2022 incident. You have identified some specific issues with Drew Cantrell's handling of the gun.
Yes, I did.
For example, he may not have had proper grip on the gun,
Yes.
or he may have pulled the trigger twice.
Yes.
You are aware that this does not align with Drew Cantrell's affidavit.
Yes.
Once again, you did not see this incident.
No, I didn't. But my other concern with this incident was that he should have checked his proximity before fire.
That is yes to my question.
Yes.
So you did not see Drew Cantrell's hand on this gun.
No, I didn't.
You did not see either of these shots fired.
No, I did not.
On direct examination, you mentioned nothing about the hundreds of firearm safety courses Mr. Cantrell taught before May 28th, 2022.
No, I did not.
All of these safety courses went safely. There were no safety violations.
No, there weren't.
And the 6 months before May 28th, 2022, you are aware of no safety violations then either?
No.
So across hundreds of firearm safety classes and 6 months, you are aware of no safety violations caused by Drew Cantrell.
Yes.
No further question.
All right, any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor. May the witness be excused?
You may. Anything else from the plaintiff?
No, Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff respondent would like to request a time check.
Okay.
Your Honor, the defense got 24 minutes and 37 seconds remaining for plaintiff and 36 minutes and 25 seconds remaining for defense.
All right. Do we wish to take a recess before we move on to defense's case in chief?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, are we doing well on time? How long do you think?
You have enough time.
Okay, 5 minutes. All right. In time.
Thank you so much.
Just one more minute, and we'll proceed. Call this case back into section, defense, be ready to proceed with your case machine.
Yes, Your Honor.
You're right.
We are not ready to proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense calls Drew Cantrell to the stand. Good afternoon, Mr. Cantrell. Could you please tell the jury a bit about yourself?
Good afternoon. My name is Drew Cantrell, and I work as a safety instructor at the Shooting Star Gun Club.
How long have you worked at Shooting Star Gun Club?
About 3 years now. I was first hired in June of 2020, right at the height of the COVID pandemic.
When you were first hired, were you interviewed for the position?
I was, yeah. I first noticed the job because of a help wanted sign at Shooting Star Gun Club, and so I went straight to Skylar Coleman, the owner, to ask for a job. And after that, we sat down for a pretty lengthy interview.
What do you mean by a pretty lengthy interview?
Well, I mean, it was like an hour-long interview. We talked about my experience handling firearms, how I had been using them recreationally ever since I was a kid. I mean, my dad first taught me when I was pretty young. And then we talked about how I managed an auto parts storeroom at my previous job. And so I was qualified to manage the inventory at Shooting Star.
After this interview, did you get the job?
I did, yeah. I got a call a couple weeks later saying I got the job. I was really excited.
Once hired as a sales clerk, what did you do?
I mean, kind of exactly what I was expecting. I managed the cash register, I managed the inventory, and I just kind of spoke to customers about firearms.
Let's talk about your promotion at Shooting Star. What position were you seeking?
I mean, a little while into my position as a sales clerk, I eventually wanted to become a safety instructor.
How did you go about becoming a safety instructor?
During my time as a sales clerk, I had already gotten a firearms safety certificate with the Department of Justice, and so after that, I had to get an instructor certificate.
Did you get this instructor certificate?
I did, yes.
After receiving the instructor certificate, were you able to become a firearms instructor?
I was. I wasn't immediately able to become an instructor because there was no open position, but in August of 2021, I did get the position.
Once you were a firearms safety instructor, what was your role like at Shooting Star?
Well, I did safety courses for our customers. I would bring them into the range and I would train them on how to use guns safely.
Dr. Morgan Judd testified earlier about 2 events before May 28, 2022. Can you tell us what happened?
Objection, Your Honor. Specifically to violation of sequestration, as provided in the pretrial and preliminary matters, I believe all witnesses have been sequestered, and thus this testimony would be outside the scope of that sequestration.
Sure, can you go over what specific testimony?
Specifically, I believe opposing counsel was just referencing the testimony of Dr. Morgan Judd, relaying it to this witness, which would be in violation of that order of sequestration.
Response?
Your Honor, I am asking the witness what has happened in May of 2021. This witness does not have to testify to his knowledge of Dr. Morgan Judd's testimony at all.
Yes, and even if that were the case, as a party representative in this case, Drew Cantrell has not been sequestered. So I'm going to overrule the objection.
Your Honor, if I may,
Even
specifically, it's my belief that Drew Cantrell is not the party representative of the defense, strictly because that would normally be Skylar Coleman, but the defense did waive their right to sequestration, to the exclusion from sequestration of that witness as well.
is that your
We
understanding
did.
as well?
We did choose to sequester Drew Cantrell instead of Skylar Coleman. Skylar Coleman is our designated party representative today, but I stand by my previous response in that this witness does not need to testify to Dr. Morgan Judd's testimony, and I am not asking him to. I am merely asking what happened in May of 2021.
All right, let's rephrase that so that it's specifically in regards to what happened in May of 2021, but we'll let you go along with this. So for now, it's overruled.
Mr. Cantrell, can you explain what happened in May of 2021?
Yeah, I had been inspecting a gun at the counter of the gun shop, and I guess I had it pointed towards the floor, but then Skylar Coleman came in yelling at me to not point a gun at another person, which I was very surprised about because that's not what happened at all. I wasn't pointing a gun at another person. I didn't even have my finger near the trigger.
And what was Skylar Coleman's response to this whole event?
Like I said, they came in yelling at me, and then they wrote me up for it. They put it in a warning letter that I got a little while later.
Mr. Cantrell, can you tell us what happened in November of 2021?
Yeah, I had been teaching a course at the gun range like I usually do, and after the course, I brought the gun from the range back to the shop, and I had not unloaded the gun, which is against company policy because normally I'm supposed to unload it at the range. It was a mistake on my part, but I was still being pretty safe. The shop was very empty at the time.
So what was Ms. Coleman's response to this incident?
They were very upset about that one too. And I mean, I do understand. And then they wrote me up for that one as well. And that's when the memo got sent out to me.
Did any other issues like this happen again?
No, never.
Mr. Cantrell, between November of 2021 and May of 2022, did any issues occur?
I never had any incident after that. No, I've never repeated my mistake.
About how many months without issue was that?
That would be about 6 months between November and May.
Mr. Cantrell, in all of the classes that you have taught in your time at Shooting Star, have there been any safety violations within the classes?
Within the classes? No, I've never
Objection,
actually
Your
had.
Honor. Once again, to the characterization of safety violations on the part of the witness, as this witness has not been entered as an expert in safety, firearm safety more specifically, the characterization of anything as a safety violation would once again be out of line.
Response?
Your Honor, this is a firearm safety instructor who teaches firearm safety practices every single day at Shooting Star Gun Club. They will have adequate knowledge and more than adequate knowledge about safety violations.
Your Honor, if I may.
Yes, plaintiff, is safety violations a specific technical term of art that only an expert could use?
Your Honor, it's our belief that specifically an expertise in safety is required to testify to what specifically constitutes a safety violation. So it is our belief that yes, it would be one of those terms of art which would require some additional expertise.
Response?
Your Honor, the defense would disagree with this statement, as safety violation is a term that can be used by anyone and not just an expert. This especially has more than adequate knowledge about what a safety violation is, as they have now been working at Shooting Star Gun Club for almost 3 years and have been a firearm safety instructor for about a year.
So we've previously ruled that a complete lay witness would not be able to testify to any safety violations. However, someone who works as a firearm safety instructor, I feel would have the requisite knowledge in order to make that determination. So I'm going to overrule the objection, but it's well taken.
Mr. Cantrell, in all of the classes that you have taught at Shooting Star Gun Club, have any safety violations occurred?
No, in none of my actual classes did any safety violation occur.
And finally, I'd like to discuss the events of May 28th, 2022. Can you explain what happened on May 28th?
Yes, so I had been assigned to teach a safety course that day. I was gonna be teaching it to Justice Carbo and Nick Allred. I had been told that previously. And when I went to actually go teach the course, I just kind of set it up how I normally do. I gave them the necessary safety equipment, and then I walked through the basic safety rules.
Did anything out of the ordinary happen in this course?
Yeah, when I went to actually go do the demonstration on how to aim and fire the gun, that's when it all went bad.
What do you mean by that's when it all went bad?
Well, I went to go shoot the gun to demonstrate how to aim and fire. But the recoil on the gun was so much stronger than I was expecting. I mean, it was stronger than any gun I had shot previously. And normally I can absorb a shot. I mean, I have extensive experience handling guns, but then Justice Carbo hit my arm. I had told them to stand in a safe distance from me, but I guess she must have moved closer to me because the gun knocked out of my hand, and that's when the next shot went off.
Did you have any control over the next shot that went off?
No, no control at all. I only fired the shot.
Mr. Cantrell, in all of your years handling firearms and teaching firearm safety trainings, has anything like this ever happened before?
No, never. Not in my 3 years at Shooting Star, and never in my entire life shooting guns had something like that ever happen to me.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. Cross-examination.
Yes, sir. Yeah, proceed. Good afternoon, Mr. Cantrell.
Good afternoon.
Let's talk a little bit about the hiring practices at Shooting Star. Now, you were fired from the job you were at before Shooting Star, right?
I was, yeah. I had previously worked at Imperium Engines, and I was kind of over that job. I did not like it anymore.
So that's yes to my question. You were fired from that place before.
I was fired.
And at no point in your interview for Shooting Star did Coleman ever mention that you were fired, right?
We didn't talk about the specifics of me getting fired, no.
And nor were you asked why you were fired, right?
No, again, there were no clear specifics about how I got fired.
Now, Skylar Coleman didn't ask you for any references, correct?
No, not from Imperium Engines.
And you're not even sure that Skylar Coleman ran a background check on you, correct?
I'm not entirely sure. I had filled out a form that looked to me like a background check, and I did give her my driver's license.
So that's a yes to my question. You weren't sure that was a background check.
Not entirely sure, no.
So, Mr. Cantrell, just to clarify, you do have a criminal record, right?
I do, unfortunately. It's not something I'm proud of.
And would you recognize a copy of that criminal record if I were to show it to you?
I would, yes.
Let the record reflect that I'm approaching opposing counsel and from the witness would have been previously marked as Exhibit 21. Permission to approach, Your Honor. You may. Now, Mr. Cantrell, what have I presented?
This is a copy of my criminal record that we were just talking about.
Is it a fair and accurate copy?
It is, yes.
Has it been altered or changed in any way since the last time you've seen it?
No, it hasn't.
At this time, plaintiff moves to enter Exhibit 21 as evidence. Objection.
Yes, Your Honor. Objection under improper character evidence.
All right. Please explain.
These instances in the criminal record go to show improper character evidence of this witness. Because they show past instances of conduct, going to show what I presume the plaintiff is offering to show that this witness acted with accordance in future.
Response.
Your Honor, if I may, the plaintiff does not intend to offer a propensity-based argument on the grounds of this criminal record. Rather, it only intends to offer what information Skylar Coleman should have had at her disposal in coming to her conclusions to hire and retain through Cantrell, which is a central component of negligent hiring and retention in this case. Response.
In that instance, then I would like to argue that this criminal record is more prejudicial than probative. This will prejudice the jury against this witness, and the probative value of this criminal record is very low, as the misdemeanors, the 3 misdemeanors on the criminal record, if I'm improper, all relate to driving and have nothing to do with a shooting range, a gun range, or anything to do with Shooting Star Gun Club today.
Your Honor, if I may, even specifically, all of the elements on this criminal record relate to public safety for the first part. But in addition, the thoroughness of Skylar Coleman in conducting the interview process, whether or not she did in fact check for any kind of criminal record, is particularly important in determining whether or not the interview process was sufficiently thorough selected a suitable candidate for such a position as a firearms safety instructor or any other position within a gun store.
So, counsel, if it's your contention that it would be enough to show that there was any criminal record that, Coleman did not check, would you be open to a limiting instruction that removes the specific details of the crimes as I believe the defense is looking for?
Yes, Your Honor, the plaintiff would be open to that sort of interpretation.
Is that okay with you, Counsel?
Yes, Your Honor, I request that the names of each charge not be listed.
All right, is that all right with you?
Your Honor, we would ask that the names be retained specifically as they relate to the public safety violations which they constitute, more so because that's more related to the field of firearms safety. Any other details beyond that, we would be perfectly fine with redacting. And should the court rule that this is an error, we would also be fine with redacting those names. However, we do find that they are particularly probative in determining the nature of the violations which Skylar Coleman should have had access to.
All right, the court will pursue a limiting instruction for the jury that removes the specific charges, but gets at the fact that they're related to public safety.
Thank you, Your Honor. So that's yes to my question. This was your criminal record,
This is, yeah.
and it contains 4 instances of public safety violations.
It does. One of the charges was dropped though.
Now, just to clarify, Skylar Coleman never referenced your criminal record to you in any capacity, right?
No, I mean, I guess it just wasn't necessary.
What Skylar Coleman did reference to you, though, was that she wanted to grow Shooting Star at any cost, right?
Well, I mean, she mentioned that they were having a rough time with the COVID pandemic, and so, you know, I mean, they wanted to grow their business.
So just to clarify, that's a yes to my question. She wanted to grow Shooting Star.
Yes, I don't remember her saying anything about at any cost.
Now, let's talk about your time at Shooting Star. At Shooting Star, you worked as a sales clerk initially, right?
I did. That was my first job, and then over about a year later, I became an instructor.
Yes, and over time, you hoped that you would eventually become a firearms safety instructor, right?
That's correct. I eventually did become.
However, in May 2021, you are actually written up for allegedly pointing a firearm at another individual, right?
I was written up for doing that, but it's not at all what happened.
However, pointing a firearm at another individual is a violation of the principles of Shooting Star gun, the rules in Shooting Star gun.
Well, yes, of course, but again, that's not what happened.
So you believed that you wouldn't receive that firearm safety instructor position, right?
I'm sorry.
Your hopes were dashed that you would receive that firearm safety instructor position because of this incident, correct?
I was worried after that, you know, my path to becoming an instructor would be more difficult, but it wasn't too bad.
So now let's talk about what happened eventually. Eventually, a position opened up in October of 2021, right?
That's correct, yeah.
And you asked Skylar Coleman if you could receive that position, right?
That's correct.
And she informed you needed additional certification if you wanted to become a firearms safety instructor, correct?
Yes, I needed a firearms instructor certificate in addition, which I did receive.
And specifically to earn that firearms instructor certificate, you said you only had to fill out a few additional forms, correct?
Yeah, I mean, they were pretty lengthy forms.
So just to clarify, receiving that firearms instructor certificate didn't require any additional training in firearms safety, right?
No specific training, no.
It didn't require any additional training in the rules of Shooting Star, did it?
No, I don't believe so.
It didn't require any training in shooting and teaching methods, correct?
No, but I mean, all the time that I was working at Shooting Star, I was around the gun range. I was seeing how people were doing the instruction. And so that was in a way a lot of training.
So that's a yes to my question. This instructor certificate required no additional training of any sort, correct?
No additional training, I guess, no.
Now, let's talk about, so you did eventually receive that position of firearms safety instructor, right?
That's correct.
And this was after you had actually been written up for violating one of the rules of Shooting Star, correct?
Yes.
Now, in November of 2021, that was after you received your firearms instructor position, correct?
Right.
And you actively broke one of the rules of Shooting Star Gun Club, correct?
It was such a stupid mistake. Yes, I did. But I was still being pretty cautious. I mean, like I mentioned, the shop was empty and I was being as careful as possible.
So just to clarify for the court, you willfully broke one of the safety principles of Shooting Star Gun Club, yes or no?
Yes, I'm not proud of that.
Now let's talk about May 28th. On May 28th, you met someone named Justice Carlo, right?
That's correct. I was going to be teaching a course for her that day.
And Justice Carbo was inexperienced in firearms by your reckoning, right?
Right, I've been given some emails earlier that told me they were inexperienced.
Specifically, it was your belief that she knew next to nothing, correct?
Right, I mean, that's why I was teaching the course.
Now, you instructed Justice Carbo to stand immediately to your right, correct?
Right, I kind of positioned her to the right and a bit behind me so that she could still see what I was doing, but from a safe area.
And at no point in your instruction did you ever instruct Justice Carbo to move, right?
No, absolutely not. Where she was perfect. It was very safe.
So you didn't instruct her to move while you were giving instructions, right?
No, I did not.
You didn't instruct her to move while you were aiming the firearm, didn't you?
No, of course not.
You didn't instruct her to move while you were firing the first shot?
No, she was standing where I wanted her to when I began the demonstration. But eventually, I think she moved closer.
So you claim that she moved closer to you. However, you didn't actually see her move closer to you, do you?
I was looking at my target, so no.
So that's yes to my question. You never saw her act, right?
No.
Now, let's talk about what happened after the events of May 20th. Eventually, Justice Carbo filed a lawsuit against you, right?
That's correct.
And you actually settled that lawsuit, correct?
We did, yeah.
You settled it for $20 million, right?
Yeah.
And so, just to be clear, you settled a lawsuit that Justice Carbo filed against you for the events of May 20th, right?
Right. I just did not want to go through the whole legal process. It would have been time consuming and expensive. I kind of just wanted it behind me. And I mean, I don't admit fault, but I did just want to end it.
So that's a yes to my question. You settled that lawsuit.
We did settle, yeah.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. On cross, it was mentioned that you were promoted to a firearm safety instructor. What did you have to do to gain this promotion?
So I had to get a firearms instructor certificate. I had to fill out forms for it with the government.
How long did you work at Shooting Star before being promoted to the safety instructor position?
Oh, well over a year at that point.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, any recross? No recross, Your Honor. You may be excused.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense calls Avery Newman to the stand.
You can proceed.
Good afternoon, Ms. Nguyen.
Good afternoon.
Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yes, my name is Avery Nguyen. I am a self-proclaimed gun enthusiast, and I live here in Imperial.
How long have you lived in Imperion?
I've lived here for about 15 years now. I moved here after I got my bachelor's from Georgia Tech.
You mentioned being a gun enthusiast.
Yes.
Could you explain a bit more about what you mean by that?
Yes, so since I was young, I've been hunting with my mom. I was about 7 years old when I started. And my best childhood memories have really revolved around hunting and being around the gun community in general. So when I graduated from college, I decided to pick it back up.
Do you still hunt now?
Yes, I do. Not as often as I'd like to, but I try to do a trip at least twice a year.
Ms. Nguyen, do you get practice in any other way?
Yes, I go to a local gun range, Shooting Star Gun Club, on the weekends to practice firing my guns as well as do customizations and things I just can't do from home.
Ms. Nguyen, what is Shooting Star Gun Club?
Shooting Star Gun Club is a local gun club. They have a shop where you can purchase guns as well as a cafe. It's really just a place for anyone.
How long have you been going there?
About 15 years since I moved here.
And in those 15 years, have there ever been any changes to it?
Yes, shortly after I started going, Skylar Coleman took over the business from her parents. And since then, there have been safety changes and physical changes too, like the cafe.
What kind of safety changes have been implemented?
Well, the employees are very knowledgeable in their fields. They all know
Objection, Your Honor, speculation.
Right, speculation is what?
Specifically, the witness just testified that the employees are very knowledgeable in the field regarding firearm safety and practices. However, as she is not the one interviewing them or hiring these employees themselves, she would have no knowledge of whether or not these employees are truly knowledgeable in their fields and whether or not they are truly able to be at the level of the caliber that's necessary to provide a safe experience at Shooting Star Gun Club. This opinion would be reserved for someone with the expertise, someone who has been involved in the hiring process or who has an understanding of how the hiring process works to constitute that these employees are in fact knowledgeable.
Just to be clear, is this speculation or improper expert testimony?
Your Honor, constituted more as improper expert testimony.
Right, response?
Your Honor, this is a rationally based perception after Ms. Nguyen has testified that she's had experience with guns for a very long time.
Your Honor, regardless of whether or not she has experience with guns, that does not allow her to come to the conclusion that certain employees within the field were still qualified. That would still require her to have specific knowledge of the hiring process and what qualifications they would need in order to be deemed safe or knowledgeable in this instance, which she has not established. And rational perception alone is not enough for her to say that an employee is knowledgeable in this field.
Response?
Your Honor, once again, this is just the perception of the witness, and it may or may not be true, but it's how Ms. Nguyen perceives them.
While that may be true, Counselor, if this is just going to the witness's perception, qualification isn't necessarily something that a lay person would be able to perceive. So for that reason, I'm going to sustain the objection. If you're able to lay more foundation as to why specifically they would believe that they're qualified, I ask that you do so.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Nguyen, what kind of safety changes have been implemented to Shooting Star?
Employees are very knowledgeable and they've
Objection, Your
hired.
Honor, I re-raise the same objection regarding the testimony that employees are very knowledgeable.
Let's allow them to finish the response.
Yes, Your Honor.
And they have hired safety officers to be on the range and just create conversation and remind newer gun users just about the safety and keep everything running smoothly.
Objection, Your Honor, I would still re-raise the same objection. This witness has not laid any foundation for rational perception as to how they're coming to the conclusion that these employees are far more knowledgeable than what they once were.
I'm going to overrule the objection. I think that they've established that they've at least seen changes that would lead them to believe that.
Yes.
I don't think they're asserting that 100%, but that's what they believe they've seen.
Now, Ms. Nguyen, have there ever been any incidents at Shooting Star since all these new changes have been implemented?
Yes, there have been 2 incidents that I'm aware of.
What was the first one?
First one, I believe, was in May of 2021 involving a employee, Drew Cantrell, when he pointed a firearm at another person.
Did you personally see him do this?
I did.
To your knowledge, was anything done about this?
Well, from what I saw, Skylar Coleman was very upset and came out and really chewed Drew out, and I don't think it ever happened again.
Ms. Nguyen, were you at Shooting Star Gun Club on May 28th, 2022?
Yes, I was.
Where were you?
I was in the gun range. I was working on a customization.
Who was there?
It was Drew Cantrell, the safety instructor, along with 2 other people, Justice Carbo and I believe Nick Allred, who were attending a safety course.
Where were they?
They were also on the range at stall 11.
What were they doing on the range?
They were about to do a safety course.
And was everything in the safety course pretty typical?
Yes, it was very standard. I see them pretty much every time I'm there. The only thing that I noticed was Justice Carbo seemed to crowd Drew Cantrell a bit.
Ms. Nguyen, how often are you at Shooting Star?
About every weekend.
And how often do you see these safety courses taught?
Pretty much every time I'm there.
Were any shots fired during this specific safety course?
Yes, that was what was weird about the safety course is usually there's only one shot fired, but there were two back to back, which is why my attention was drawn.
Do you know what happened after the first shot?
After the first shot, I can't be totally sure, but I believe the first shot went into the range.
What about the second shot?
After the second shot, I looked over and saw Justice Carbo fall to the floor, and people were yelling to call 911. It was crazy.
Miss Nguyen, you testified that you go to Shooting Star about once a week.
Yes.
How long are you there each time?
Usually several hours at a time. I like to make it a whole day trip.
And you testified that you see about one safety course taught each time, is that correct?
Give or take, yes.
Now, Miss Nguyen, in the 15 years that you have gone to Shooting Star once a week, have you ever noticed any injuries or heard about any injuries prior to May 28th, 2022?
No.
And in the 6 months leading up to the event of May 28th, 2022, were there any safety violations that you heard of?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Were there any violations or incidents at all?
Not that I'm aware of.
Thank you. No further questions.
Ross?
Yes, Your Honor. Before I proceed, may I request a time check? The plaintiff has 17 minutes, 20 seconds remaining, not going to the cost that's going to happen. And then the defense has 24 minutes, 18 seconds remaining. All right, Your Honor, with that, I'm ready to proceed. Good afternoon, Ms. Nguyen.
Good afternoon.
Now, you would say that you have a close connection with Shooting Star, correct?
Yeah, I'd say that.
And in fact, you would call it a second home for you, right?
Yes, I would.
And for the most part, you didn't see any issues with Shooting Star, correct?
No, not really.
However, there was one instance in May 2021 that you observed, correct?
Yes, there was.
Specifically, you directly saw Drew Cantrell point a handgun at another person, right?
That is how I perceive these.
And could you just turn to Exhibit 8 in your binder? The record reflects that I'm now reviewing Exhibit 8. It's already been entered into evidence. Now, Ms. Nguyen, you're aware of these rules in the gun safety range, correct?
Yes.
And you would agree that on the second point, it says, only point at it if you want it destroyed, correct?
So this says,
And as you previously testified, you saw Drew Cantrell point a handgun at another person, correct?
I did. That's how I saw it.
Now, at the bottom of this, you'll see that it says, failure to abide by the above rules may result in removal from the facility and denial of future shooting privileges. Did I read that correct?
Yes, you did.
So following this incident, did you see Drew Cantrell get fired?
No.
Did you hear about him being removed from the facility?
Objection, lack of personal knowledge.
Your Honor, specifically, the witness has testified that she already has knowledge regarding the actions that were taken following Drew Cantrell's, following the instance with Drew Cantrell, as she already testified to what she heard regarding what actions were taken by Skylar Coleman. Simply, this is establishing from her experience with that incident, which she's already testified of, having an understanding of what she believed was the actions taken forward beyond that regarding the detention of Drew Cantrell.
Response.
Your Honor, Ms. Nguyen is not an employee at Shooting Star, and so therefore, she's not gonna know what goes on behind closed doors and what complete reprimand Drew Cantrell may or may not have gotten from this incident.
Your Honor, specifically, I'm asking from her experience. I'm not asking her to come to any conclusions about the definitive nature behind these repercussions, but from what she testified to, her understanding of what actions were taken by Skylar Coleman, from her experience, what other actions she believed to have been taken.
I believe the way the question was phrased did refer to whether or not the witness saw any sort of removal from the facility. So for that reason, I believe it does pertain to personal knowledge. So I'm going to overrule the objection.
Yes, Your Honor. So specifically, from your experience, did you see Mr. Cantrell being denied any privileges?
I personally did not.
And you didn't see him being removed from the facility either, as you previously stated, right?
Not to my knowledge.
And it was actually after this point that Drew Cantrell became a safety instructor, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
And he was the same safety instructor that was teaching the course on May 28th, 2022, correct?
That's true.
And you can put that exhibit off to the side. Let's talk about that day, May 28th, 2022. Now, on that day, you were standing in stall 3, correct?
I was standing behind stall.
And the incident itself took place in stall 11, right? Yes. And that was over 30 feet away from where you were standing, correct?
That's true, but 30 feet away is not very far when it's put into perspective.
Well, you talk about putting into perspective, but the record reflects that I'm now approaching opposing counsel and in turn the witness the copy of what is 3 marked in exhibit 2F. Could you turn to exhibit 2F in your binder? Yes. And what is this that I've just handed you, or it's in front of you?
This is a picture of stall 11, and it shows where everyone was standing.
And does it appear to be an accurate copy?
Yes.
At this time, the plaintiff moves to enter exhibit 2F into evidence.
No objections, Your Honor.
So,
Let the record reflect that I'm now publishing to the jury as well. Now, Ms. Grant, you testified that it wasn't very far, the incident wasn't very far from where you were standing. But you can see that stall 11 is all the way towards the end of that wall, correct?
Yes.
And to be clear, you weren't paying very close attention to what was happening at the time of the incident, correct?
I was not paying very close attention.
But the one thing that you did see was that cargo had been crowding through Cantrell, in your opinion, correct?
Yes.
However, at no point did you see Drew Cantrell correct Justice Carbo's position, right?
No, not to my knowledge.
Thank you, Your Honor. There are no further questions at this time.
redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Nguyen, your ties to Shooting Star Gun Club in any way impact what you saw that day?
Absolutely not. I'm simply here to tell you what I saw.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Recross.
No recross, Your Honor.
Right, you may be excused. Next witness.
This time, the defense calls Skylar Coleman to the stand.
Proceed when ready.
Good afternoon. Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Good afternoon. My name is Skylar Coleman, and I'm the proud owner of Shooting Star Gun Club.
How long have you owned Shooting Star?
I took over from my parents in 2008, so it's been about 15 years now.
Did you have any prior experience before you took over?
Yes, my parents started the company back in 1989, and I basically grew up there. I've worked there since I was a teenager.
Did you make any changes to Shooting Star after you took over?
I did. I really wanted to foster a community and make Shooting Star more inclusive, so I renovated and expanded the gun shop. I also added a cafe and bar.
What's the nature of your business like?
We sell firearms. We have safety instructors that teach a complimentary safety course, and we have a shooting range where people can shoot firearms.
Ms. Coleman, I would like to direct your attention to the unfortunate accident that occurred on May 28th, 2022. Do you remember that day?
I do.
Could you tell us your recollection of what happened?
Yes. Miss Carbo came in to Shooting Star and we completed the transaction for her firearm. I had Drew Cantrell take her back to the course that I had previously arranged, but I stayed back in the shop. We were fully booked that day.
What happened after that?
It was quiet for a while, pretty typical, but then I heard 2 back-to-back shots go off, which was really strange, so I ran to the shooting range.
What did you see?
It was terrible. Miss Carbo was on the ground, clutching her leg, and there was blood everywhere. The firearm was laying on the ground next to her, and Drew Cantrell was standing above, dumbfounded.
What happened after that?
I immediately had an employee call 911, and I stayed with Miss Carbo until paramedics could arrive.
To the best of your knowledge, what happened after the accident?
Miss Carbo was taken on an ambulance to the hospital, and it seems that she has made a full recovery.
We know from previous witnesses that Drew Cantrell was one of your employees. When was he hired?
I first hired Drew in June of 2020.
And for what position?
Initially, he was hired as a sales clerk.
Was there an interview process?
Yes, along with the formal application I had him submit, there was a very thorough interview that lasted for over an hour.
What was your impression of Mr. Cantrell from that interview?
He was clearly qualified for this position. He'd grown up hunting occasionally, and he knew a lot about our business. All that this position would really require was for him to manage inventory and run a cash register, and he was clearly capable of doing that.
How long was Mr. Cantrell a sales clerk?
He was a sales clerk for us for over a year, and then I promoted him.
What position did you promote him to?
I promoted him to a firearm safety instructor.
Could you explain what that job is?
Yes, of course. Instructors are the people who teach the safety course that we offer complimentary to the purchase of every firearm.
Why did you promote Mr. Cantrell?
He was clearly ready for this position. I'd seen him work with us for over a year, and he obtained the 2 necessary certifications. I also had him observe hours of training courses both at our facility and at other facilities.
Ms. Coleman, we've heard about 2 previous incidents involving Mr. Cantrell. Tell us about the first.
The first one was in May of 2021. I did not personally witness this incident. However, it was reported to me that Drew Cantrell pointed a firearm at another person. I treated it as if it was worst case scenario.
What do you mean by treated it like worst case scenario?
I treated it as if he had actually pointed a firearm at someone, and I reprimanded him immediately. I made it absolutely clear this was to never happen again.
Could you explain the second incident?
Yes. The second incident was in November of 2021. Drew Cantrell had just finished teaching the safety course, and he brought the loaded firearm back into the shop. However, our policy is to unload guns on the range and not in the shop. So again, I made it super clear that this was to not happen again.
Were either of these incidents ever repeated?
Absolutely not.
Leading up to May 28th of last year, how was Mr. Cantrell as an instructor?
He was an incredible instructor. He taught hundreds of courses flawlessly. I even personally observed some of his courses and can say he was doing a great job teaching them.
So in the 6 months leading up to May 28th, were there any issues at all with Mr. Cantrell?
None whatsoever.
No further questioning, Your Honor.
All right, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Good afternoon, Ms. Coleman.
Good afternoon.
You are the sole, excuse me. You are the sole owner of Shooting Star Gun Club, correct?
Yes, I am.
And you hired Drew Cantrell?
I did.
Let's talk about how you hired Drew Cantrell. Now, you mentioned that you initially hired him as a sales clerk, right?
Yes, I did.
And later promoted him to a firearm safety instructor?
Yes.
Now, in neither of these instances did you perform a background check, right?
That was not necessary.
So you were not aware of Drew Cantrell's criminal history before coming to trial today, correct?
I was not.
Now let's talk about what else you did not check when you promoted Drew Cantrell to firearm safety instructor. You had no idea if Drew Cantrell ever had a job using or handling guns, right?
I didn't, but I hired him as a sales clerk and everyone needs to start somewhere.
But that's yes to my question, that you had no idea if he'd ever had a job using or handling guns.
Yes,
In fact, you had no idea if he'd ever even taught a course on gun safety, right?
no, I didn't, but I initially hired him as a sales clerk.
And you never bothered to ask him these questions, did you?
I did not.
Let's talk about what you did know when you promoted Drew Cantrell to firearm safety instructor. After your resident safety instructor had left, you knew that you really needed a new instructor, right?
Yes, we had an opening for a position.
And you promoted Drew Cantrell.
I did.
More specifically, you promoted Drew Cantrell because you thought that he would fit the checkbook well, right?
That was one factor in the promotion, yes. When in-company hires are less costly than completely new hires.
And you promoted him without making him undergo any sort of training regarding firearms instruction, right?
I didn't make him undergo training, but I made sure he had the necessary certifications and made sure he observed hours of courses at our facility and others.
Well, let's talk about those certifications. You're only aware that Drew Cantrell obtained one safety certificate, correct?
Yes, I know he obtained one safety certificate.
Not two, correct?
I'm not positive.
Is it your testimony today that you're not positive that he didn't?
I am
obtain
aware
one?
of one safety certificate.
Now let's talk about Cantrell's performance as your employee. You're aware that Drew Cantrell pointed a handgun at another person, correct?
This was reported to me, however, I did not witness it myself.
Let the record reflect that I'm now retrieving exhibit 8 from evidence. Ms. Coleman, please flip to exhibit 8 in your evidence binder. You're aware of this exhibit, correct?
I am.
Please follow along with the second bullet point as I read it aloud. Only point at it if you want it destroyed. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, you did.
So Mr. Cantrell had broken this rule, correct?
I was not sure if he had broken this rule. That was just what was reported to me.
But following this incident, you filed a memorandum, correct?
I did. I keep records of everything that is reported to me.
And you gave Mr. Cantrell a verbal warning, right?
Yes, I did.
But even following this verbal warning, Mr. Cantrell made another mistake, didn't he?
Yes, completely separate.
But that's a yes to my question. He made another mistake, right?
Yes.
More specifically, in November of 2021, Mr. Cantrell was involved in an incident in which he left guns loaded in the shop, correct?
He brought one loaded gun into the shop to unload in the shop. Yes.
Please direct your attention back to exhibit 8 and follow along with the 5th bullet point as I read it aloud. If it's loaded, leave it on the line. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
So Mr. Cantrell had broken another rule, right?
Again, I'm not positive if he even broke a first rule, but this rule I did witness him break.
And in your own opinion, you thought that Mr. Cantrell would unload the guns, right?
Yes, he was going to.
But you have no way of knowing for certain whether or not he actually would have, do you?
I guess not, because I reprimanded him as soon as I saw him bring it back into the shop.
Now, following these two incidents involving Mr. Cantrell's misuse of guns, you didn't fire him?
No, that was absolutely not necessary.
You didn't even suspend his employment?
Again, not necessary.
In fact, you allowed him to continue working the same job as a firearm safety instructor, right?
Yes.
And this is the same job he held when the incident with Justice Carbo occurred, correct?
Yes, it is.
Thank you, Your Honor. There are no further questions.
Right, may we direct?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Coleman, leading up to May 28th, 2022, did you have any reason to think that Mr. Cantrell was not able to teach that class?
Absolutely not. I mean, the numbers really don't lie. He taught hundreds of safety courses with 0 incidents.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any recross?
No recross, Your Honor.
All right, you may be excused.
At this time, the defense rep.
All right, do we have time for a 5-minute recess? Yeah. All right, 5 minutes.
Your Honor, during this time, may I ask for a time check from the time clerk?
Yeah, you can do whatever you want, we're in recess.
The plaintiff has 11 minutes and 22 seconds remaining. The defense has 18 minutes and 33 seconds remaining. Sorry, that was plaintiff for 922.
They told them, did they tell you how to pronounce it UN? Did they tell you how to pronounce it that way? I just came to that conclusion. And it's actually pronounced win, by the way. Just one word. I just thought it was weird.
I mean, maybe they pronounced it New M.
No, it's like a common last name. It's like saying like the last name like Bob is like Bobby. Like that's weird. Like you can't like say like that's good. No, it's like a cultural thing. It's Vietnamese.
We still have about one more minute, but is everybody here?
Yes, Your Honor.
Everyone for the defense is present.
All right,
Your Honor, before we proceed, may I ask that my timekeeper be able to reposition himself?
yeah, absolutely. Want me to be the witness stand?
Yes, please.
And counsel, how much time do you want to reserve for rebuttal?
I would like to reserve any remaining time for rebuttal.
All right. All right, closing argument, maybe.
Your Honor, members of the jury, opposing counsel, may it please the court. Carelessness is not a coincidence. When Justice Carbo walked into Shooting Star, he expected his life to change. He thought he was going to get expert safety instructors and thorough safety instructions. And he was right. His life did change, but not in the way that he expected. Because members of the jury, you see, because of the carelessness of Shooting Star Gun Club's actions, his life was permanently ruined. Now, today, the plaintiff had to prove by preponderance of the evidence that Shooting Star acted negligently in hiring, supervising, and retaining Drew Cantrell. And in order to establish that charge, we had to establish 4 main components. First, a Shooting Star Gun Club hired Drew Cantrell. Second, that he became unfit to complete the work for which he was hired. That third, Shooting Star Gun Club knew or should have known about this incompetence and specific risk it posed to others. And fourth, his actions and his negligence were a direct result of the harm caused to Justice Carbo. Now let's clarify that burden, members of the jury. Today, we had to prove each of those elements by a preponderance of the evidence. That's 51 to 49%. That means if you find each of these elements just slightly more true than untrue, you must rule in favor of the plaintiff. And today, we met that burden in full. But let's start by going into each of those elements, starting with negligent hiring. When Drew Cantrell was initially hired, it was to be a sales clerk and nothing more. But then the opportunity opened up for him to become a safety instructor, and he instantly grabbed at the chance to get his hands on more guns. And in fact, it was his lucky day because Skylar Coleman was so desperate to grow their business. So desperate that they never once provided any formal training to Drew Cantrell, asked for any previous records, or even consulted any references about his prior record at jobs. So desperate that he couldn't even tell you about Drew Cantrell's criminal history, one that he would have found had he actually looked into Drew Cantrell and his background. Members of the jury, when someone chooses not to look into the type of person that they're allowing to handle firearms, it's no coincidence when that results in damages. That's a direct result of carelessness. And there were multiple indications that Drew Cantrell was not fit to perform this work. You heard today from both Avery Nguyen and Ross Hernandez how they both saw Mr. Cantrell point a gun directly at another person, which, as you heard from Dr. Morgan Judd and many other witnesses in this case, was in direct violation of one of the fundamental rules of gun safety. But not only did he break a rule once, he broke another rule. In fact, in November of 2021, he defied specific expectations by bringing a loaded weapon into the gun shop when he knew he wasn't supposed to. Now, today, you saw that memorandum that was issued to Drew Cantrell for both of those instances. Members of the jury, when an employer issues a disciplinary record for their employee, that means that they acknowledge their wrongdoings, that they acknowledge that they've participated in reckless behavior. So Skylar Coleman clearly understood that what Drew Cantrell was doing was wrong. But she didn't ask him to go through any other training. She didn't suspend his employment or fire him or even remove him from the premises. Instead, all she did was promote him, and she allowed him to stay in that position throughout May 28th, 2022, when the incident took place. Now let's talk about that day, May 28th, 2022. On that day, Mr. Carbo and Mr. Allred walked into Shooting Star with the intention of getting a safety course. And while they were being positioned by Mr. Cantrell, he told them to stand to his right, which is exactly what Mr. Carbo did. But today, Mr. Cantrell told you how he never once bothered to look back and make sure that Mr. Carbo was standing in the right position. Members of the jury, Mr. Cantrell's only job isn't to just watch his target while he's shooting. It's to make sure that the novices who he's supposed to be teaching are standing where they're supposed to be and that they're in the safest position as possible. But he didn't do that. He didn't care enough to bother to check that Mr. Carbo was exactly where he was supposed to be. And as a result, he ended up shooting. Members of the jury, all the signs were there for Shooting Star, but Skylar Coleman chose to ignore them. It was no coincidence what happened on 8/28. It was a direct result of shooting star's carelessness. We ask that you find shooting star liable on the account of negligence. Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor. Permission to set up my demonstrative?
Yes.
Your Honor, permission to train. Yes.
May I proceed? Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury. Numbers do not lie. Drew Cantrell had 2 safety certificates, 6 months of competence, and taught hundreds of safety courses with 0 issues. Add that together, and that equals a safe, competent, and responsible employee. These numbers do not lie. In order to prevail, plaintiff must prove today that Shooting Star had the duty to hire and retain competent employees, that Shooting Star somehow breached this duties, and that breach of duty caused harm to Justice Harbaugh. It is not enough to prove that Drew Cantrell acted recklessly in the past. It is not enough to prove that Drew Cantrell was even at fault for the May 28th incident. The plaintiff must prove today by a preponderance of the evidence that this incident was more likely foreseeable than not. They have failed to meet their burden today because numbers do not lie. This case starts with 2. Drew Cantrell had 2 safety certificates, a firearms instructor certificate and a firearms safety certificate. Dr. Morgan Judd, the expert today for the plaintiff, had the same certificate as one of her qualifications. The next number we must remember is the number 6. Drew Cantrell had 6 months of competence, 6 months of successful training, 6 months of work with firearms without a single issue. Members of the jury, I'd like to ask you, how many classes must someone teach before they are deemed competent? A dozen, 50, 75, even 100? Allow me to suggest that hundreds of classes should be enough. Drew Cantrell taught hundreds of safety courses without a single safety violation, without a single complaint. In fact, in almost 15 years of business, Shooting Star has never seen an incident like that of May 28th before. If the plaintiff can't produce a single safety violation in these hundreds of classes, why would Skylar Coleman have any reason to doubt Mr. Cantrell's competence to teach that safety course on May 28th, 2022? Yes, there were 2 alleged safety violations, but the first was just a misunderstanding, and the second was severely reprimanded and never happened again. So unless you wish to hold Drew Cantrell a captive of their past, surely hundreds of classes taught without issue, along with 6 months of exemplary performance, should be enough. Finally, we must remember the number 20 million. after the events of May 28th, Justice Carbo sought compensation for her injuries. And she received it. In fact, she received a $20 million settlement with Drew Cantrell. But not satisfied with a mere $20 million, she now intends to take every penny from Shooting Star Gun Club, even if it's the last thing she does. The plaintiff has told you today that Skylar Coleman valued her business over safety. Skylar Coleman herself told you how she offers safety courses to every gunner. She told you how she reprimanded Drew Cantrell, even though she wasn't there when Drew Cantrell may have pointed a firearm at another person. She chose to do what was safest. Skylar Coleman also told you about how she ensured that Drew Cantrell observed hours of safety courses before she was promoted to a firearms safety instructor. Skylar Coleman saw the numbers and was a responsible business owner. Yes, carelessness is not a coincidence, but Skylar Coleman and Shooting Star Gun Club were not careless. They saw the numbers, and numbers are not negligence. The plaintiff has told you this cherry-picked story, focusing on two events over the course of almost 3 years of employment. They can dramatize these events as much as they want, but numbers do not lie. Drew Cantrell had 2 safety certificates, 6 months of competence, and taught hundreds of safety courses without issue. Members of the jury, the defense asks you today to consider the numbers and find the defendant not liable.
Thank you, Counselor. Rebuttal to the plaintiff.
Yes, Your Honor, can I actually request that opposing counsel leave that demonstrative?
Yes.
And could I also ask my timekeeper to reposition themselves and give me a time check?
You have 3 minutes, 38 seconds.
See?
You may.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court. Today the defense told you that numbers don't lie, and we completely agree. So let's take a minute to walk through the numbers. Today, the defense told you that Drew Cantrell had 2 certificates, one for firearms safety and one for being a firearms instructor. But when Skylar Coleman took the stand, she told you she had no idea whether or not Drew Cantrell had actually obtained that instructor certificate. So she had no idea if he had actually followed through with the instructions that he was given to obtain that certificate and become a qualified instructor. So those hundreds of classes that he taught should never have been his job in the first place, because Skylar Coleman let him have a job as a safety instructor without knowing whether or not he was really qualified. And today, the defense also told you that numbers don't prove negligence. But members of the jury, there is one crucial number that you need to keep in mind. 3. That's how many instances of gun misuse Drew Cantrell had. 1 in May of 2021, 1 in November of 2021, and a 3rd on May 28th, 2022. And for those first 2, Skylar Coleman completely recognized the wrongdoing on behalf of Drew Cantrell. She issued a memorandum for him, but rather than making him go through proper credentials and proper training, she let him continue to teach those hundreds of courses. Now, at the beginning of this trial, the defense told you that the plaintiff would not be able to show how a specific number of instances would allow to prove that Drew Cantrell was negligent, or that Skylar Coleman had recklessly hired or retained them. But how many instances can an individual have before it's proven that they are incompetent? Members of the jury, the defense is absolutely right. Numbers don't lie. And if Skylar Coleman had simply paid attention to the numbers, had paid attention to the number of times that Drew Cantrell had violated these rules, she would have seen exactly what a threat he was to Shooting Star and could have prevented this whole accident from happening in the first place. We ask that you find Shooting Star Gun Club liable on the count of negligence. Thank you.
All right, everybody, you can take a breath. Thank you so much for your presentations today. We're just going to take a few minutes to make sure we filled out our ballots. So just if you need to stretch, use the bathroom, pack up, do all of that, and we'll really need just a couple minutes on paper ballots filled out.
Oh. Oh, it's right here.
Yeah.
Hmm. Okay.
Judge, before you submit, would it be helpful if we got everybody to just say their names, we can put names to faces for the witness and attorney ranking, or do you have it all? Okay.
I don't got it, but like, but I'm still like, doing the excellent thing, so.
Okay, yeah, so once you're done, we'll have everybody say their name, just.
Yeah, I'm gonna need that.
Names to faces.
I'm gonna need that. Alright. Yeah. Oh, it's on here. Like their names are on here, I think.
Yeah, just so you can.
Oh, put a
remember-
name to the face.
Yeah, remember who's who.
Okay, yeah, I'm done with that.
So if we could just go quickly, say your names and then like what parts you did, whether that's like, oh, I did the opening or I just did this. Let's start from the side.
I'm Naomi Olmans. I directly drew Cantrell across Justice Carbo into the closing argument. I'm Elizabeth Myers. I did pretrial for defense and I did the Avery Newman direct. I'm Avery Asmus. I performed the Skylar Coleman direct and the roster as cross.
I'm Eli Schusler. I did the opening statement as well as the Dr. Morgan Judd cross-examination.
I'm a usual.
Yeah, we'll do the witnesses as well.
I'm Olive Trump and I played Skylar Coleman.
I'm Ella Hessel and I played Avery.
I'm a Yush Ghosh. I did the pretrial argument and I did the direct for Dr. Money.
Hold on, sorry. Can you go through the witnesses? I'm sorry, I missed it. I was looking for like the character name and not your actual name, so I mixed it up.
I'm Olive Trump and I was Skylar Coleman.
Oh, okay. And
I'm Ella Hessel and I was Avery.
And then Elliot Beckner was the guest witness.
Correct.
I'm a Yush Ghosh. I did the pretrial argument and the direct of Dr. Money.
I'm Sahana Sriram. I did the direct of guest witness Justice Carbo, the cross of Avery Nguyen, and the closing arguments for the plaintiff.
I'm Joanna Blackman. I did the opening statement and the cross-examination of Skylar Coleman.
I'm Neil Murphy. I did the direct examination of Ross Hernandez and the cross-examination of Drew Cantrell.
I'm Jenny Min and I played Ross Hernandez.
I'm Leah Kim and I played Dr. Morgan Judd.
And who was the guest? Was that Julia Jackson?
I believe so on our side, yes.
My ballot has been sent in. We'll let her know once they've all been listed.
Sorry, I'm taking extra time. I'm just trying to make sure I get this right. Oh, I forgot to write.
What do you have to vote?
You have to write everything. Like, are you for real?
Yeah.
Bruh, like I haven't writing
It's all sent on the computer.
Yeah, well, yeah, but like they also gave us this paper that says backup. So
That's just for emergencies, if, something happens.
so I didn't have to do it.
No, sorry, I shouldn't be.
You're all good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Did you submit?
Yeah, I'm submitted, yeah.
Okay, can you confirm that they've been?
Yes, all three are in.
Excellent. All right, you've heard enough of my voice already, so I'll start with my co-judges. Introduce yourselves and then compliments and comments.
Okay, I can go first. My name is Daniel Abraham. I am a U Chicago law student, on first year of law school. And you guys did very excellent. Y'all really in high school, by the way? Like, bro, crazy. Y'all, your speech is actually really, really great. And I really enjoyed it. Very, well spoken, and also really, really good pace. The only thing that I could say, I guess that would be general, is that you can recognize that your facial, like everything that you do is being watched by not only jury but also judge, right? So even if you're not talking, you can like hear someone say something and be like, that little thing right there, we're gonna be like, oh, is that off? And now we're starting to question someone without them even saying something really wrong, right? There's a lot of things that you can add implicitly and explicitly, right? The explicit part you guys got down for sure, but whether it's like you're asking questions, right? And whenever you ask the questions, you hear something, you're like, that's interesting. Well, etc. That's interesting right there is indicative of something else, and you can use that to your power without necessarily saying it out loud. Some things don't need to be said, right? They can be just felt or intended, right? And that would be like a strong aspect if you can developed that, that wasn't like overt in all of you guys' speeches. Aside from that, very well done.
Hi, my name is Emberlyn St. Hilaire. I'm an undergrad at the University of Chicago. I'm a second year. I'm on the mock trial team. I attorney, I witness. I did mock trial in high school, so I was where you guys were not too long ago. You all did a great job. Like this was a very, very like good round, very close round. And, like judges always say to me, I don't know who won my ballot, but I can genuinely say like I have no idea who won my ballot. The only comment I have like overall, I give a lot of specific comments on like objections in my notes, but like overall for attorneys, I think one thing that can be worked on is your movement about the well. I think some of you were a little too stiff in like your movement. And then some of you did a lot of like micro movements where you like shift in place, you take like a couple steps to the left or right. So like I'm a big fan of you move with like purpose. So you move, like make your point and like plant yourself and then like continue to talk. So that's one thing for both sides. And yeah.
I'm confirming it for y'all.
And then for witnesses, I loved all of you as witnesses. I just felt like there could have been a lot more character infused into a lot of your witnesses. I feel like a lot of your witnesses have potential to be like more, I guess like for lack of a better word, like entertaining than it was. Like give a lot more leeway to infuse like more background, maybe like be funny or whatever you want to do. But overall, great job.
I did forget to talk about the witnesses, my bad. Small comment real quick. Again, I'm not done this like my trial thing, so like I might be wrong. I put a lot of comments, by the way, so y'all have a lot to read from me. All right, I just like doing that. But I will say that you got to be careful as a witness that you don't. I mean, the point of a witness is to like the judges, or sorry, the jury is going to decide whether or not your testimony is valid or not. We're going to judge whether or not we believe you, right? So try not to make yourself less believable by trying to be on the side, right? If you start to argue with the attorney about a point that doesn't like, it's not necessarily about what's right and wrong, et cetera, then we're gonna think, oh, you're trying to push us in a direction. You're to a side right now, and that doesn't feel right when you're supposed to be giving an unbiased take, or not unbiased, but your stance, right? And if you're telling the truth, then you shouldn't really need to push things in one way or another. It should just come out on its own, right? So you don't want to make it seem like you're trying to argue for a side when you're just a witness. You're just answering the question.
Hey everybody, my name is Josh Ezrell. I did on trial for 4 years in undergrad at Western. Like Amberlynn, I'm an attorney and a witness. And I know you probably heard this in all of your rounds, being like, "Oh, this was a great round." This is my first time ever judging high schoolers. I was genuinely blown away. You've absolutely exceeded my expectations. Because I did speech and debate in high school, and I would not have been able to do mock trial as well as you did mock trial. So pat yourselves on the back for that, because that was really, really impressive. In particular, I thought the cross-examinations were done really, really well. You were able to, on both sides, you were able to extract good facts from the witnesses. Meanwhile, the witnesses, at least in my opinion, weren't overly fighty. Emberlyn took a lot of the sort of like constructive critiques that I was going to say. So I'd absolutely second the moving around the well. We have this massive space. We have this really good room, and attorneys, in their opening statements or during the pretrial arguments, you're just kind of standing in one place. You're able to really emphasize specific points, and more specifically emphasize the organization of your points. If you use the full space to indicate, this is my argument here, now we're transitioning to another argument. So you don't have to rely so much on filler words like an on time. I also would agree with the point about character. I honestly don't know if there are stricter guidelines in high school about the extent to which you are able to add in background or personality to your character. But provided that you are not constrained by the rules to do so, whether that is accents, costuming, just adding in details to sort of breathe life into your character, because they aren't just a vessel for stating facts. They aren't just a vessel for giving their professional opinion or what they saw on the day in question. They're supposed to be real people, so sort of imbuing them with that light, really helps the jury connect to them and also keeps us engaged when it is a fairly complicated fact pattern. The third thing I would say that isn't just, going off what Amberlynn said was, vocally, obviously it's a very dense case, there's a lot you're trying to say, there's a lot of different facts you're trying to get across. Having vocal variation, whether that is, you know, sometimes they're going high, sometimes they're going low, sometimes they're being fast or slow or loud or soft. Having as much sort of variation as we can, not to the point of being distracting, but to the point of the emphasis, really helps us as the jury understand this is the moment. This is the thing that we need to really be focusing on. So whether it's your cross has this one really good pocket, or you have this great piece of rhetoric on your opening and closing, slowing down, getting intense, having some emotion about it, really helps it land with the jury.
Y'all look at each other's comments, by the way, because I talked a lot about like all these different things in y'all different comments. So there's a lot about that, specifically that. So,
if you want individual feedback, I'll stay back for a few minutes. Are we allowed to know where you're from? Is that a thing we're allowed to do?
Yes, 100%.
Where are y'all from?
We're from Oregon, Westland.
We're from Maryland.
I'm from Texas.
All right.
Florida, went to Heritage. Yeah.
I think they're here.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else before we dismiss? Cool.
I'm also here for personal feedback. If y'all have any
Yeah,
questions.
me
or anything like
too.
that, y'all can hit me
Thank
up.
you so much.
I'm first time doing it, so.
Thank you.